And hello everyone, welcome back to another tutorial. So in this tutorial we'll be discussing HTML. We'll be going through the basics of HTML and at the end we'll do a little project. Let's start from the beginning. What exactly is HTML? HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language, is what is used when creating websites. HTML is the bare bones of a website. The text on the website, the input boxes, the images, the audio, all of that is put on the website with HTML. This brings us to why should you learn HTML? If you just want to design websites, like creating your own from scratch, then HTML is where you need to start. It is also what you need to know if you want to learn CSS, JavaScript, or PHP. So it's basically the starting point if you want to learn any of those. It is incredibly easy to learn. So even if you have no experience in programming or web development or even computers, you can still do HTML because HTML is so easy. It's not a programming language, it's a markup language. Meaning you don't really write programming code, you write more like a design code. HTML is supported by most, if not all, browsers. I can't really think of a browser that would not support HTML, since that would be the standard for any website. So no matter what you run, you can run HTML by just opening up your web browser, whether that be Firefox or Chrome. It is 100% free. Not just to learn, but to write as well. You can just open up your computer. You don't need internet access. You don't need to pay a fee. You can just start coding HTML. So it is completely free, which makes it even better because it's a money magnet. So you can start making money from something you do for free. And the best part is it runs on all operating systems, because all operating systems to some degree probably support going online or viewing a website. And HTML is just what you use to create websites. So if you have a browser, whether that be Edge, Internet Explorer, Firefox, you can view HTML. Now, what text editor or IDE should you use if you want to follow along? Well, since HTML is so simple, you can use whatever you want. It can be something basic like Notepad or Notepad++, which is great for beginners. Something more in the intermediate level, such as Sublime Text or brackets, and in something to the more powerful level for those who are willing to walk the extra mile and learn how to use it, Vim and Visual Studio. However, if you have no idea which one to use, just use Notepad or Sublime Text. How difficult is the language actually to learn, and how long will it take to learn this language? HTML itself is considered one of the easiest languages to learn if you're interested in learning how to code or just to design a website. Even if you have no experience whatsoever, it is relatively easy to learn. And you can probably learn HTML within a week, and if you really tried, probably even a day. And hello everyone, welcome to your very first HTML tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to set up your first HTML website. First, open up your file manager and navigate to about any folder you like. I have a nice trash folder where I like to throw all of my trash that I can easily delete and don't have to worry about recovering. You should preferably have a code folder where you can put all of your code and use it later on. Now here I can create a new folder and just call it my website. You can call it whatever you want, but this is where we'll be putting our HTML. Inside of this folder we need to create a new file. And this file can be called index.html. Now, Windows users, you guys should watch out because you might not get an index.html when you save this. Because on Windows, it will sometimes say index.html.txt. You should make sure that it doesn't say .txt because it has to be a .html to work. So if you see after you save it .txt, then this isn't right. You should just change that to be .html. I'll also show you another way to change that in case it is a .txt, but we'll get to that. Now, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code when coding HTML. You could use Sublime Text or Vim or whatever you prefer. I just prefer Visual Studio Code because it's a nice code editor to use. To open it up, you could just right click and say open with VS Code or Sublime Text or whatever you have. I can't do that here in Linux, so I will open up my terminal, and you can skip this part if you're not on Linux. And I'm just going to go to my trash folder, and I'm going to open up VS Code here. Now VS Code is open in this folder. You could also, if you wanted to, open up VS Code, then drag and drop your file into VS Code. That would also work. I just like to open up VS Code in the folder with that HTML file. Cool. Now this folder right here is inside of VS Code. It's right here. As you can see, there's index.html. If I were to create another file called books, or next that also works, .html, then it will pop up here because it's in the same folder, and I can click on it and go into that file. So I'm going to close this here because I don't need this open anymore. Then here I can just resize it a little bit so everyone can see, and maybe switch sides. I'm going to delete this file. Now VS Code will show you if you may have a .txt after your HTML. It will also not have this HTML5 logo here. If we were to rename this to .html.txt, then you'll notice it has like this little file thing here. You can just rename that then to .html. Like that. That is if you're on Windows. I believe Mac doesn't do that, but Linux doesn't do it at least. Now we need to put some text here to be able to open this inside of our browser. So I'm just going to put any sort of text in here just so we have text. Then we have multiple ways of opening this inside of our browser. One way you can do it is you can open up the folder with this HTML file and you can drag it into your browser. This could be Firefox, Chrome, I'm using Vivaldi, or whatever browser you want. You can just drag and drop it in there and it should theoretically open it up. Let's maybe just put something else here and let's try that. Okay, so I can't drag and drop into my browser. That means I'll have to right click, and you can do this on any other operating system as well. Say open with, and you can just choose a browser. In my case, it will say open with Vivaldi automatically. But you might have to say open with and choose where you want to open it up, be Firefox or Chrome, whichever browser you use. You might have to say open with other application. This does exist on Windows as well. But once you select the application you want to open it with, it will open up in your browser that you choose. And here we go. So we just have it here, and there we have it here. So that's one or two ways actually you can open it. Another way you can open it is if you're in VS Code, then you could go to your extensions tab, which would be this little block tab right here. And let's see here. Here is a nice extension called Live Server. This extension allows you to run HTML from VS Code live in your browser, meaning you don't have to refresh whenever you make a change. Because currently, if we were to just keep this open, if we were to make a change here and we save, then we have to click refresh to see that change. So now we have to click refresh again and it will update. But with this Live Server extension, you can just go here, but you can actually close it from the browser here. Say right click and just say open with Live Server. And this will open it inside of our browser with a live server. Now what we can do is if we type something here and when we save, it will automatically reload the page for us. And it can't do it without the proper stuff, so I'm just quickly going to go here. And I'll explain all of this in a second. There we go. Now it should be able to live reload. And there we go. So now whenever we make a change, it will live reload that change. And just ignore all of this. Just random typing that happening. as you can see. So then we don't have to click refresh. You could also get HTML snippets, which makes it incredibly fast to code HTML. And you'll see me using it quite a lot here as well. Now that's a way you can open up HTML inside of your browser. And there are probably more ways, but I think these are enough. Now this right here is a basic HTML setup. This is how an HTML page looks on its bare bones. First we have our HTML tag. And a tag is whatever is contained within these brackets here, these bigger than and lesser than symbols. We also have these bigger and lesser than symbols, but this time with a slash here at the front to say that this tag is closing, meaning this is the HTML tag and everything goes inside of the HTML tag. Then here we have the head tag, and I'll explain all of this in a second, and in here we have the body tag. You'll notice to have opening and closing tags. This is a closing tag, this is an opening tag. Now everything inside of the body tag is what the user will see on the website. So if I go here and say hello world, then now the user will see hello world. That is everything that's inside of this body tag, any piece of text. The head tag is things that the user won't necessarily see. We'll get more into the head tag in the future tutorials, but for right now you can just know this isn't things that's usually on the website itself. This is usually where you'd import stuff from outside of the website into the website, or doing some background things like giving data about the website to the browser. So when we search up something like I am cool, then if we scroll down, you'll notice here is like descriptions, and here is like a title. That is what goes inside of this head tag. It's not necessarily for the user to see when you go onto the website, but it does help when people are searching for your website. This is called metadata, but we'll get into that in a later tutorial. What we could do is we could give our web page a title by saying title. You'll notice it's an opening and closing tags, and we can say my website. Now you'll notice this tab here just changed from what it was to my website. If we were to remove this, it's back to just giving us the path to this HTML file. But if we put this here, then it says my website. So that's pretty cool. Now one thing you should take note of is that HTML is at its 5th version, meaning we are trying to learn HTML5. Currently we are using HTML4. I think most browsers would probably interpret this as HTML5, but some browsers may not. So we need to specify something to kind of get everything rolling. That is open bracket, an exclamation mark, doc, type, HTML. And this will just specify to the browser that we are using HTML5. I don't think this is required anymore, but it's still regularly used just in case. And this will also enable all HTML5 features inside of your website. Save it. You won't really see a difference because it doesn't really bring a difference. It just provides more features if the browser doesn't automatically see this as an HTML5 and sees it as HTML4. Nice. Now sometimes you'll have a lot of text, and this is the first tag I really want to teach you. I'm going to put some lorem here, and lorem is just some text in Latin that nobody really has to understand, but we usually use it just as a placeholder. As you can see here, here's lorem, and here's lorem. Now let's say I wanted to have a paragraph, so I'm going to go another lorem here. Now you'll notice, first of all, my IDE, which is this text editor right here, it doesn't actually allow this lorem to be on its own line, as you can see here. Now, do not want to translate. The reason for that is because HTML out of the box doesn't care about spaces. It will remove any extra space for you in most scenarios. We'll get to scenarios where it doesn't, but in most scenarios it will remove all of the space for you, except for these spaces here to separate words. So if we want paragraphs, we'll need to use the paragraph tag, which is a p tag. with an opening and closing bracket. You can then put your text in there to make it a paragraph. You can have as many paragraph tags as you want to create multiple paragraphs. So now we can move that in here. Now if we go here and I don't want to never translate Latin, but here we go. So now we have 2 paragraphs. And HTML knew we want 2 paragraphs because we put it in paragraphs tags, which is just an opening tag with a P inside of it and then a closing tag with a P inside of it. As I said, you can have as many P tags as you want, and you're also not limited to how much you want inside of those P tags. So if you want like a ton of text in one P tag, you can do it. So now there's one paragraph with a ton of text, while the rest don't have a lot of text. Now take note, you should not put paragraph tags within other paragraph tags, because paragraph tags themselves are mostly meant to contain text, not another paragraph. So whilst HTML won't really yell at you for doing this, it is very much recommended to rather do this and have your paragraph tags outside of each other. And also take note, only some tags are allowed to have more than one of them. For example, special tags are not allowed to have more than one. Like this doctype HTML, you could have more than one, but there's no point in having more than one because it just defines that we're using HTML5. This HTML tag, there's no point in having more HTML tags, because if we are going to add another HTML tag here, like that, with the same content, it's just going to duplicate the stuff that's already there. The reason is because HTML here basically says this is the website. So if we're just going to put another HTML tag there, it's going to be like we're having 2 websites underneath each other, which we don't want, because that will definitely not be good for the browser. And in the head tag especially, you do not really want multiple head tags. In certain scenarios it's okay, but in this scenario you don't want this. It's fine if you do it, but it's recommended not to have multiple head tags, because you should only have one head tag that describes everything in your website as you want it. Then the body tag, which displays things to the user, you might think this will need more than one tag, but yet again, this is basically this here. So if you have 2 body tags, you basically have 2 screens here. It will not really affect how the website looks, but it will just not be how it should be. So it's bad practice to have 2 body tags. But everything inside of the body tag can have multiple tags of itself. Like the P tag, there can be multiple P tags, you do not have to worry about that. You're not limited to how many paragraph tags you can have. Now sometimes you want to see your code inside of the website here. This is more for development purposes, and you'll mostly understand this as you go along with learning web development. But sometimes you want to see this here, this HTML. But you might not have your code here, or if you want to see how this code is being converted to HTML here. To do that, you can right click on the website, and you'll either have a developer's tools section or an inspect. But you'll see somewhere here, there should be an inspect option, and it's usually Ctrl-Shift-I. Once you click it, you'll see a bunch of things here. But the most important part is this elements one. If we drag this a bit here, and like that. Then here is our website. As you can see in the body tag, we have our paragraph tags, and it's doing a nice job highlighting all of the paragraphs for us. So when we do this, we get our lorem. When we do this, we get our lorem, as you can see there. We can also go check the head tag and see what's inside of the head. You will most likely not see this. However, I'm seeing this because I'm running it from this live server. Same with this right here, the scroll to top. It's because of an extension I have, so you will most likely not see this. Same with this script right here. But yeah, this is a way you can see your HTML within the website. You can also modify this if you wanted to. This will not modify the file, so you don't have to worry. I can go here and say 2 times lorem. Now when I save that, it will go here and say 2 times lorem. But in the HTML file, it will still just say lorem. So you can mess around with it in here without it changing up a bunch of things it shouldn't. Then finally, the last thing I want to tell you all about in this tutorial is that casing in HTML doesn't matter. like this HTML here, you could go HTML. This is perfectly fine. This head here, you can go HT, or not HT, you can go head like that. It won't really care. This title here, title, because casing, at least with the tags, they don't matter. So we save this. Well, if I were to save this without formatting it, then as you can see, it doesn't do anything unnecessary. However, it is highly recommended to keep everything lowercase. This is just to keep everything consistent. So rather not have capital case in your HTML except for text that you want to display to the user, and for this. Those are about the only two times you want to have capital case in your HTML that you have to know of. If we save this, then you'll notice my IDE automatically converts this from capital case to lowercase because it knows that we want lowercase to keep with good practice. And there we go. That is the basics of HTML. This tutorial might have been a little bit difficult or even just bigger than what you thought it might be. But it's just an intro. Don't be afraid with what you've learned here. If you forget about it within a minute, then it's perfectly fine because we'll be repeating everything we know here until it's basically smashed into our brains. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next HTML tutorial. A recap from the previous video. So all of the text you want people to see, like everything that goes here, should be inside of the body. And everything you don't really want people to see that should be done in the background should go right here inside of head. For example, this right here. I know someone who the other day actually tried to put in header tag in here, which is just an H1 tag. And they tried to go hello world. They couldn't understand why some of the things they tried to do didn't work, because later on we're getting into creating a local link and things like that. And you couldn't quite figure out why it didn't want to work, because when they click on the link, it should actually take them to this H1 right here. So you thought everything inside the head should be what is on top of the page. Do not make the same mistake, or this is a common mistake. So that is just something you should take note of. Today we'll be working with text. So currently we know how to create a paragraph. So we can just maybe add some lorem here. Perfect, creates a paragraph. But the thing is, if we want to create a new line, a new break line, then we can't really. We just have to create a new paragraph. But you don't always want this massive space here. Maybe you just want to go to the next line. But doing this doesn't always solve your problem, as you can see here. So a way around this is to, let's say we want to have a break line right here. We can just say BR. This tag right here doesn't need any closing tag. It doesn't need a tag like this. Whoops. As you can see, even VS Code doesn't want me to do it. But it doesn't need this. As you can see, it's even red underlined because it doesn't actually need it. This is what's called as a self-closing tag. It closes itself. And if you want to make it easier, you can actually just go like that. And I should change this back to a P. Anyhow. So save that. And now as you can see, it just went to the next line. Instead of creating a new paragraph, it just dropped down to the next line. People usually like to do this, so they can see the difference. So there's a break line there. And now they will know if they look here, the break line is the same as here. But this is optional. You don't have to put that slash there. It's just recommended because if you start with React or have to get out of the practice of doing this in some form, then it's going to be a nuisance because you never actually did it before. So now you have to do it. But it's just recommended that you put that closing tag there, just also to specify for yourself that, hey, this is self-closing. We don't have to worry about anything here. Anyhow, so this is a self-closing tag, and it's just to break the line. So if you just want to break any line here, you can just put more break lines here. You can even do it in the middle of a word, like I'm going to do right there, and like here, and then we can do that. Do it here, and if we refresh, as you can see, it breaks wherever we put a break line. Perfect. So I'm just quickly going to create a few p tags. with some text inside of it. So this right here, this is normal text. We can just say normal. Perfect. Save it, refresh, it will just say it's normal text. Right here, we want to make this text bold, so I'm going to say bold. And to make text bold, you can just say opening bracket, B, closing bracket. And this is not self-closing, so you have the italic word to close, as you can see here. So this word right here between the B, opening and closing B tags will be bold. Refresh, as you can see there, this is and in bold. So that just makes text bold by going B. You can also use another format, so by going strong, and you can say strong. Whoops, not string, but strong. Bold and strong are relatively the same thing. Usually I just use a B tag because I find it easier, but they do recommend that you use strong to put emphasis on something. So yeah, that's about it. I just like to use B because it's a lot less to type. But you can use strong if you want to. It's personal preference mostly, or I believe it is, but you can use both of them, they do the same thing. Then you can put an I here for italic. And we just take this and we can put it here and we can just say italic. Refresh, and now it's italic. It's a little bit sloping to the side. I believe it's relatively the same thing with EM. So if we go like that, then as you can see, it's relatively the same thing with EM. It's the same process with B and I and strong and EM. I'm not quite sure what EM stands for. It might be embedded text, but I have no idea. So you can also put deleted text, which is just strike through by going del and just deleted. Save that, refresh, and now we have deleted text. So it's just a strike through text. It doesn't just have to be one word. Before I forget, this can be multiple words as well. So actually put a strike through this entire paragraph, because why not? Whoops, that's my mistake there. Save it, refresh, and now the whole paragraph has been deleted. Take note that you shouldn't be doing something like this, for example, putting just an I here and not putting a paragraph there. Whilst there is probably nothing wrong with this, this is seen as bad practice, because let's say we want to make this bold and then we do the same thing, and now if we refresh, they're going to be next to each other instead of underneath each other. So yeah. You can also have multiple in one, before I also forget. So let's go here and put in I here, and we can say italic, and here we can put a B here and make it bold, and boom, you can have more than one in a line. So here I can say italic and bold. Even if you want to, we can put a delete here, so they'll, whoops, go away, and we go here, boom, as you can see there. So you can have multiple in one line. You're not restricted to having just one or just two. It's up to you. You can also nest them. So let's say we want to delete everything until the end of bold. So now this is nested. So if I just maybe resize this a bit, then here we can see a bit better. So this is the P tag, and then the deleted is around the italic and bold elements until the end. And if we refresh this, and you can see there, it is striking through even the italic and the bold. So you can put them inside of each other if you wanted to. So if I want to make this bold as well, it is possible. You don't have really a limit how much you want to put things inside of other things. So refresh this, and I have bold and italic while strike through at the same time. Cool, so that is one way you can do things. Let's just keep that there, just as an example, so you will always know. Then you can also have big and small text. So here I'm going to say big, and here we can say big, or we can just probably stay the same. And here we can say small, and you can say small. Save that, refresh, and now we get big and small text. Usually I don't think big is used anymore in HTML5. I believe it's been left in HTML4. These days, if you want to make something bigger, you either use a header or you use some styling. But it is there if you ever want to use it, but I believe because it is not highlighted, it probably has been deprecated. You can also get superscript and subscript text. So let's say 10 times, and here we can say sub for subscript, and let's go like 5 or something. I don't really do this math, so I can't really say if I'm doing it right. I believe this is actually chemistry, so let's make this sup for superscripted, and in here we can say, and also I believe like CL is an actual element, or CH, and here we can say sub, and then we can like put a 2 there or something. Now if we go here and we refresh, then as you can see here, 10 times 2 to the power of 5, so that's superscript text, and also CH and then a subscript 2 there. I believe that's how it works. I don't really do chemistry or math that much, but you know, it's there if you want to use it. So that's sub and superscript. And then we also have inserted text. So by going ins, take that example and we can paste it right here. And here we go. So that just kind of underlines it. But the same with I and em as with B and strong. We also have a U, which means underline. As you can see, they do exactly the same thing. They just have multiple because sometimes it depends on the practice you're using. In this case, I don't really use inst at all. I just use a U. I also don't use em at all. I just use an I, and I don't use strong at all. I just use B. I just stick with the easy ones. The ones you find easiest to remember is the ones you can use. It's up to you. It's your preference. Also, here's a fun fact. If you put a semicolon here and say times, times, and is it and? No, it's the other way around. If you put a semicolon on the back and you go here to the front and put an and there, then you'll get in the real time symbol. So look at that X right there, that's an X. This right here, that's a times. So that's just a fun fact if you ever wanted to know. We'll be getting to these later, but I just want to show you that it exists. In this tutorial, we'll be looking at HTML headings. So there are different types of headings for different types of scenarios, but they're fairly easy to remember. First, you have your H1 tag, which means basically your #1 heading on a website. This is your all website heading. For example, if this is a website about animals, then this will be animals. There we go. This H1 tag is bigger text than the usual P tag, which is normal sized text. It is to signify that this is the main title. It is a very big piece of text because this is what should taking most of our focus. The rest of the titles are very simple because they follow the same structure. You have your H2 for your second type of title, and here you could say something like dogs. You'll notice it's a little bit smaller than in H1. That is because this is more of a subheading than the heading. Then of course you can have like 2 H2s here, and we can go cats, like that. You should take note that usually you'd only want about 1 H1 on your page, and then maybe 2 H2s, and then 3 H3s, and then 4 H4s. All of these are titles, and it can go up until 6. So H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. We'll go through all of them. But you want to take note that you don't really want more than 1 H1 on your page, because that would be the main title. Having more than one H1 on your page could confuse a screen reader or just something scraping your website, meaning it looks at the HTML to get some idea of what your website is about. But that's usually a robot doing it. So if you have two H2s, the robot will see two main titles for your website. And then usually you can have like two H2s, or most people will probably stick with trying to have one H2, but you can probably have 2, 3, or 4 H2s. I'd say for every category, you can probably have an H2. So in this case, we have cat, dogs, and we can go H2, and here we could put a horse. And of course here you could put some text. So dog is an animal, like that, and then you could explain what a dog is. Then of course you can have an H3, and an H3 would be like a type of title inside of this dog's title or inside of the cat's title. It's kind of like a subcategory of that category. So here you could say feeding, and this will be how to feed this specific animal. And this is just an example. You can of course choose something else as a topic. This is just to kind of give an example of what we mean. And here we could say feed pellets. And of course you could change it up a bit, but it's just to give you an example. And as you can see, we have feeding, and under feeding we have feed pellets. And you could probably have something longer here to explain more about feeding, but in this scenario it doesn't matter too much. Then I'm not going to really use the rest in such an example because I kind of feel it limits us a little bit. Now we also have the H4, which is just the heading 4. So it is smaller than the H3. It will follow the same structure, you know. So you have the H1 as the main heading, H2 as the categories, H3 as the categories within those categories, H4 maybe as the categories within the H3 categories, and so on and so forth. You don't have to use them like this. That's just how I use them. But you could use them as actual just normal headings if that is what you want. But yeah, so we have our H4 and our H5. So heading 5, and we also have our H6 for heading 6. You'll notice they get smaller as they go. The main reason is just because, you know, the heading's importance changes. So the H6 will be smaller because it's the least important heading. Usually most people don't really go under H4, but it depends on your scenario. Sometimes you want an H6 there because it's recommended to have more H6s than you have H5s, and more H5s than you have H4s, and more H4s than you have H3s, and so on and so forth. But you don't have to worry too much about the size, because later you'll be able to change the size to whatever you want. To give you a taste of that, we can say style, and we can just say font size and for rem. And now you'll notice heading 6 is a big heading. And that is just the way you can change the font size. But we'll get to that in a later tutorial because that's part of the CSS course. So you don't have to worry about the font size. You can change that later. But those are the 6 headings you get in HTML. Now you'll also notice that when I work here, my page here will automatically update. Yours won't necessarily do that unless you have the live server extension installed in VS Code. To get that live server extension, you can open your extensions tab and you can just search for live server. This is completely optional. I just did it so I don't have to click on refresh the entire time. And I believe it's this one. Let's see. And yes. Should be this one. And you can just get this and you should be able to run a live server. And I believe it also supports PHP. So yeah, that's nice. If you want to do PHP, then you can. And then you can just right click once you have it and say, whoops, let's just bring that up. Open with live server. And here you can also have a PHP server, which is nice. Anyhow, so to give you an example, if I were to change this here, as soon as I save, it will automatically refresh here. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, we can start working with comments and attributes. So a comment is just a piece of code that will not be displayed to the user. So let's say I want to say here my description on, and then just blah blah blah. So I just want to say, this is just something you want to say to yourself. So when you go and reread your code to understand what you just did, you know what to do. But the problem is, let's say, and then we just add a description here. Let's just put some lorem here. Okay, now if we do this, then as you can see, we see my description on blah, blah, blah. We don't want that, because this should only be seen for us. So when we look through our code, we know what was going on here. So a way we can hide this is by going and opening bracket, an exclamation mark, and 2 dashes. And it actually auto-completed for me. So then there's another 2 dashes and a closing bracket. Now this right here is a comment. Whatever goes inside of this will not be read by the browser. So it will only see this instead of that. So this will basically be hidden. So that's a nice way to do it. And you can, of course, put more things in here. Let's say you decide, okay, you don't want this on your page anymore, but you might want to put it back later. So you just quickly throw it in a comment. And now if you reload your page, it's no longer there. And let's say you come back 3 days later and you're like, no, I actually do want this in my page. You can just put it back. And that's the nice thing about comments. Whatever goes inside of them cannot be read. And you can have as many comments as you want. And there you go. So that's comments. Fairly simple. It just allows you to make some notes. This is great if you're following a tutorial, because then you can make notes on your, maybe you make like files of notes inside of them. Then you can make notes using the comments. Okay, and now we can talk about attributes. So attributes is basically like an attribute of an element. So let's say I ask you to name your attributes. It's almost something like that. Now, to give an attribute to an element, let's say we go here to this p tag. Then we can say align, and here we can say center, for example. Now this will align the text center, as you can see here. We can also go right. And my H is at the wrong place there. And now it's right. The reason why my IDE, or code editor, whichever you want to call it, doesn't really give us highlighting or anything for this right here is because usually instead of adding attributes, you would add CSS. So it would be something like style is equal to, and it can be like text align, and you just do center. And that is an example of CSS. So now we don't need this align there anymore. The CSS will do it for us. But we're not at CSS yet, so we don't have to worry about that. This is also great. So let's say we want to put in horizontal line here. So in horizontal line is just an HR, and it's a self-closing tag, so you can just do that. So it's just like a break line tag, but this is just HR, and it will create a horizontal line, as you can see right there. You can have as many of them as you want, and it will just create a bunch of horizontal lines for you. So that's the horizontal line. A quick overview of that as well. And we can do something like width, because this is an attribute you can give it. And we can say, let's say we want it only to be half the width of the page. Do that, we say 50%, and now it's only half the width. If we say 25%, it's going to be 25% of the width. You can also use pixels, so let's say 25 pixels. And as you can see, that's about 25 pixels. So pixels is just another way of setting a size to something. But if you don't feel comfortable with it, you can just use 25% here instead of pixels. And you can also add another one to it. So we can say align. And you can make that, let's say, right. And this will align it to the right. Or let's say we want to align it to the left. As you can see there, now it's aligned to the left. So yeah, that is attributes. It allows you to just kind of modify what you have and just quickly give it some changes. Make your page look a little bit better by changing the attribute. So yeah, that's about all there is to it. So we just covered horizontal lines and we covered comments as well as attributes. But you'll notice if you go to a lot of websites, they have like all of these nice images that you can look at while scrolling through them. And this can be very helpful to keep users on your website because it keeps them engaged. It shows them, hey, there's something to look at, let's look at it. So let's get started. Now you'll notice I have a image here called myimage.jpg. JPG, keep note of that. This can be any image file extension that is supported by the browser. So PNG, JPEG, I believe GIF is also supported, but most of the times you'll just use PNG or JPEG. And it's just an Asian girl standing in the field. Nothing too special about this image. I got it from Pixabay. And you'll also notice that it is here. So it is actually my directory. I'm not screwing with you. Now, here we have the ability to add an image. And it's as simple as creating an image tag, so img, and then self-closing it. Image tags are self-closing because they pass all their data in via attributes. For example, the source attribute takes in the image itself, so my image, and this can be any name as long as it ends with the correct extension. Take note, if this wasn't a JPEG, it might have been a PNG. Then you had to say PNG here instead of JPEG. Whatever this extension is, it's very important. All right. And yeah, if we save that, then as you can see here, there's the image. Beautiful. Although you don't have to worry about it being a little bit too big for this screen here, because we'll be working with that in a second. Now you'll notice, let's say you forgot to say that P there, so now it's just myimage.jg. You'll notice that we just get this little broken image symbol. Sometimes the user wants to know what that image is, and you cannot always predict whether this image will be passed in correctly or not. So we can just say alt for alternate text. This is basically an attribute that can be used to describe the image. So if the image on the website breaks, then this can be a way to tell the user what was there. So we can just say Asian girl standing in field. There we go. Save that, and you'll notice that here it says Asian girl standing in field instead of showing a broken image icon. So this just basically describes that this image had an Asian girl standing in the field. And if we were to put that P back there and were to save it and refresh, and then we would get our image again, but we will not see the text because that text only appears if the image doesn't load. So if the image loads incorrectly. Now you'll take note that this image is in the same folder as my index.html. There are multiple ways to get an image from a different location. Sometimes you will get that image from location, so let's say from Google, for example, and you can link to that image. That is completely possible. I'm not going to cover that though, because usually you'd want to host your images yourself, so you don't want to really upload it to a different source or just copy and paste the link to that image. So I'm just going to show how to do it locally and not online. But if you want to know how to do it online, then you can probably go Google it. There's probably a lot of answers. And I believe we schools will probably also have some sort of way around getting it from online. But usually it's just a copy and paste, and you paste the link into the source here. But I'm going to show you how to do that because I'd rather not. Let's say this image was in a different folder. So let's create a bunch of folders here. I'm going to create a source folder because let's just imagine there's a very big hierarchy of directories here, of folders, and inside of that source folder I'm going to create a folder called static. Instead of that static folder, I'm going to create a folder called images, and there we go. So now here we have a folder within a folder within a folder, and this image is now inside of that images folder. So we're going to move it there, as you can see there. To show you that this is actually what's happening, let's go here. As you can see, we have a source folder. Instead of that, we have a static folder. Instead of that, we have an images folder. And instead of that, we have a myimage.jpg. So now we have to redirect this image to that location. So to do that, we can just say /src /static /images and myimage.jpg. So you can just use your forward slashes here. So from the first folder, which is source, and it's in the same folder as this images, as if we go here to HTML, so we're going to source. So it's /source, that's what we're doing here, /source. Then we're going to static, which is inside of it, as you can see here, static. And then we're going into images, as you can see here, images, and then we select our image. So that's how you can get it if it's inside of a different folder. Okay. Now, sometimes you do want to resize this image because, as you can see, it's a little bit big for my screen. So I'll have to, resize it a little bit here. Now, to do that, you can give it another attribute with the height or the width. So let's go width, and we can make that equal to, let's say, 200 pixels. Save that, and now this image will only be the width of 200 pixels. We can increase this, let's say maybe 300 pixels, and now will be a little bit longer. It also has a height attribute, which let's say make it 500 pixels. We save that. As you can see, now it is stretching 500 pixels. Usually you don't want to specify the width and the height. You'll do that with CSS. But since we don't know CSS, you usually only want to specify either the width or the height. You do not want to specify both of them because the stretching, it doesn't look very good. So what you can do is you can just specify the width, and it will basically scale itself to have the height and the width as it should be. So it will keep its original aspect. So 16 by 9, for example, will stay 16 by 9. But if we add in height, it can change from 16 by 20 or 16 by 5 or whatnot. But if you keep just the width or just the height, then it will scale them correctly. Now, sometimes you also want to add some styling to this image right here. So I'm going to maybe resize it just by another 100 pixels. So let's say we want to give it a border here around the image. That is pretty simple. Another attribute, which is border. And that border can be, let's say, 1 pixel, for example. You'll notice it now has a nice little border, maybe a bit difficult to see. So let's actually increase that border to, let's say, 5 pixels. As you can see, now there's a nice black border around the image. And yeah, these are just how to work with images. And that's about all there is for this video. So we learned how to get an image, so how to display that image inside of our web page here by using the source attribute. And then if that image cannot be loaded, we can use the alt attribute to put some text here to explain what is this image. And then we also have a width, which is just specifying the width of this. We can also set the height if you want to. And then we can also set the border, just to give some nice black borders around the edges. So a link is represented by an A tag, which stands for an anchor tag. And that's why it's an A, because it's anchoring to somewhere. And in here, inside of the two A tags, you can see like the name of wherever this takes you. For example, if I want to go to Google, I can say Google. Then here because currently it won't do anything. It will just be some text. Now to send it somewhere, you can say href, which just means hyperreference or hypertext reference, something like that. But basically, whatever goes in here is where your page would redirect to. This can be one of your own pages, which we'll be getting into, and it can also be a page outside of the website, which we'll be starting with. For example, let's say we wanted to go to DuckDuckGo. So if I want to go to DuckDuckGo, let me just Google it here, duckduckgo.com. Now we're just going to okay, because I'm on Firefox and it has that as my default, I don't think I can. But it's just a simple HTTPS. Take note, the HTTPS is a lot of times is important, unless it's your own page. But for most of the time, you want to include that HTTP or HTTPS. You don't need to know what it means, you just need to include it. And in www.duck, duckgo.com. This could of course also be Google, which we'll see in it. Oh yeah, it's actually Google here, so my bad, let's make it Google. There, so now it's just https www.google.com. Now if I were to click on this, it will take me to Google. Now that's nice. So this is how to link to a page outside of your web page. Now one thing you will notice is when you click on that link, you'll notice that it uses this page, but a lot of times you don't really want that. You want people to stay on your page for as long as possible. And you shouldn't do what I'm going to show you everywhere, but you should use it most of the time, especially if it's going to a page that is not part of your website. But you should set target to _blank. And this just means open this page up on a new blank tab. That's what this target means. So if we were to click here now, then it will open up on a new tab and keep our page open here. And most of the time you actually do want to do this. You want to open it up on a new tab so the user can always just click back if they want to go back. But take note, you shouldn't just use _blank everywhere. Let's say you have a page navigation. Like, you know, on many websites you have like a number here that's like page 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, let's say you want to go to page 5. If you click on page 5, you want it to open up on the same tab. But if you click on a link that says support us maybe, then you might want to open that up on a new tab. This is just kind of depends, but you'll notice that if you have too many _blank tabs, it might become annoying for the user because it constantly opens up new tabs, and you don't always want that. But if you don't use it, it will also be annoying to the user because let's say they want to stay on your page, but then when they click on a link, they go outside of the page, because most people don't know you can click the middle mouse button to open up on a new page. Most people don't know that. So they will just click with their normal mouse button and it will open up on the same page. But just to show you that it's actually true, let me just remove this _blank here. So if I were to click on this with my normal button, my right click, or I mean my left click, my bad, as you can see it opens up on a new page. But if I middle click, it opens up on a new tab. If I middle click that tab, at least in Firefox, it closes that tab. If I click with my right and left mouse buttons, it also opens up in a new tab. But most people don't know this, so they will try and open it up and then boom, now they're going off the website and they never wanted to. Okay, so that is probably enough of that. Now sometimes you also want to specify what's going on here, where are we going to go, because this might not always be very explaining. So let's just say here, so let's put this maybe in a p tag, and we can just bring this here. You can click, and then as you can see there, we can say here. Problem is, the user doesn't know what here means. What's here? Because most people don't know that link appears there at the bottom. Most people don't actually know that either. So what you can do is you can go here and say title as an attribute, that when they hover over this, there will be a title that says where you're going. So we can maybe say go to google.com or something like that. Just something to explain it. So if I hover over it, it says go to google.com. Click on it, and now we'll go to google.com. So that's pretty neat. Now, sometimes you want to link to a same or to a page on your website. Now you can also add your link here, so www.yourwebsite.com. The problem here is you can't actually test it out then, because if you're hosting it on your own page here, or maybe let's say this link changes, then you have to go and change it and modify it, and you'll have to test it by uploading the page and seeing if it works. You don't want to do that. So another way you can do it, so let's actually create a new page here. Let's go here, new file, and we'll call this menu or something.html. Now this page right here, will just ignore most of this because most of this is just some templating I create for myself. I'm just going to say here in the title, menu. Okay. And I can probably also remove all of these. Now here, I can specify something like, this is the menu page. Now, usually if I want to go here, I have to go to the link here and I have to say menu. or I have to open it up in the browser. Now let's not save that link. Now if we click there, it takes us to the menu page. Then let's say we want to have maybe a link that takes you to the home page. So we can say go, or let's say home, and this will navigate you back to your home page. And here we can say href is equal to, and here it actually pops up, and we can say index.html. So you just put in the file name and .html. If you do remember the previous video where I did talk about images, navigating to the file is exactly the same as with an image. So if this is in a different folder, you'll have to use .. and / to actually get there. And now if I were to click on this link, it will take me to the home page. So let's just wait for it and click on home. And now I'm back on the home page. And of course here, I can also specify, let's say go to a page on our website here. So I can say menu .html. Take note, you need to specify that it's .html, otherwise it might not notice. And here we can say go to next page. Okay, click on that, and now we're going to our menu page. Click on this home here. Now we're going back to the home page. Very confusing, but that's how you can navigate on your own file structure. And also if you upload this, it will actually work, so you don't have to worry about it not working, because it will search for this file name in your website. Anyhow, and one more link that we want to know about is, let's say we have an h1 here, and it's like, or navigate or something, and underneath it we have a bunch of a tags, and let's say this one goes to, or let's have just one a tag for now. And I'm just going to put a hashtag here. That hashtag means it's a dead link. It's not going to take you anywhere. It's just going to stick at one place here. So if you click on that link, it won't break the website. Just taking that as a note. That's what that hashtag means. If you click on the link, don't break the website. Anyhow, then here we can say dogs, for example. And it may be the website is a website about, let's say, animals. So we can say cats. And then underneath it, we can create a p tag. And I'm going to put some lorem here, like a lot of it. Lorem times 10. Oh my gosh. Times 10. There we go. Save that. And now we'll have this. Now if I were to go here, I can specify an h2 that contains dogs. And then also a p tag. And this p tag also contains some basic lorem. Now, we have dogs here. But you don't always want the users to scroll down to where they want to go. You sometimes want to allow them to navigate the page by just looking maybe at the navigation bar up here. And take note, usually the navigate won't be an h1. This is just as an example. So a way you can do it, so if they click on this dogs link, you want them to go here. Actually, I'm going to add some more lorem here just to give a better example as well. Lorem times 3. And then I'm also going to add another h2 tag here. And I'm going to say parrots, or let's go birds. And then we can create another p tag of more lorem. Lorem times 4. Okay, there we go. Now we have more than enough content here. Now, if we want to go to dogs, one thing you can do is we can go here to the h2 or anywhere in any of these tags where you want to navigate to. And I can say id is equal to, and this has to be a special value. No other element on this web page may have this id. We'll talk more about this once we get to CSS, but no other element may have this id. So here we can maybe say dog title. Copy that. And now if we go up here, we can say href to hashtag dog title. Now if we were to click on that, it navigates us to this one right here, as you can see there. And if we look at the link here, it changed to h.html and then hashtag dog title. So this basically is an easy way to navigate yourself somewhere. You can even maybe go birds. And we can say here bird title. Then down here, just to give you an example, we can create a B tag. You don't usually want to do it as I'm doing it right now, but it is as an example for the video. Now this B tag, I'm going to give it an ID and call it bird title. I'm just going to add some more lorem here to add some more spacing. So lorem times 10, and there we go. Now we have a nice big web page. So now if I say birds, as you can see, it navigates me to this bold we have right here, because I added an ID here called bird title, and in here at the top I used an anchor tag to navigate to that ID. So as you can see with this hashtag. And this is one reason why IDs should always be special per element. So if you want to put an ID here, it shouldn't be the same ID you're going to put somewhere else. And this is nice because now let's say I want to go to dogs, simple, just click on dogs. When I go to birds, just click on birds, and there we go. So today we will be talking about span and div. These two are basically the same, but they work with different elements. For example, or let's actually start with what they are before we get to examples. So div and span are both basically just tags to contain something else. It is just a basic container. It just kind of splits your website into multiple parts. For example, we can have a div here, div, and instead of this div, we can maybe have like an h1, and here we can say my header, and underneath that we can have a p tag with my header text, right? And in here we can have another div, and in this one we can say h2, my section, and here we can have a p tag with a bunch of lorem, on it. So let's go 10. There we go. So now we have this, my header and my section. You'll notice nothing looks different. That is because div doesn't do anything. Div actually only, let me just format this, only gives you a little container to work with. Meaning that these two are on the same page, but they're kind of in their own little separate pages. I'm going to use some CSS here, but you don't need to know too much about CSS. We'll get to that. So I'm going to say style is equal to, that should be style, is equal to border 1px solid black. This just means put a border around this that is black, and it should have a width of 1 pixel. As you can see, this div contains this right here, meaning any styling that we give to this div here will stay within this div, meaning you can style different divisions of your page differently thanks to div. So instead of just styling the body and then styling everything inside of the body accordingly, you can now style something in this div differently from what you would style it here. For example, here we can also say style, and here we can maybe say font size, and here usually it's about 1 rem, which is 1 rem, that's what we usually have, or 16 pixels. Let's stay with that. So usually it's about 16 pixels per, that's what a font is usually. So let's make this nice and small. Let's make it 10 pixels. You'll notice that this changed, right? But not this. This stayed the same. Here we can even go and say font size, and this one we can make extra large. So let's say instead of 16, this would be 20 pixels. And now we have bigger text here. But this doesn't affect this. That's the difference. Div splits these two apart. So this is its own little div section, and you can even collapse it here. And then you can work underneath it. And you can have as many divs as you want. And this is a little thing. And inside of divs, you can also add another divs. So here we can say, here we can have another div. And this div will inherit any styling properties that this div gives it. And here we can maybe say, I am Steve. We can put this inside of a p tag, no problem. And we just put this at the end, save, and now we have this. And it kind of gets whatever is here. So as you can see, it gets that font size, not the border, right? The border is only around this div, while the font size gets inherited. And in here, of course, we can do things like style is equal to color red. Now this will just change the text color to red, as you can see there. Okay, now that's enough CSS and stuff, because we still have to get to CSS and whatnot. But the main point here is divs allow you to split your website into multiple little boxes, and in these boxes can contain their own elements and stuff like that. Div is basically like a version of the body tag. That's basically what div is. Now let's talk about span. Now spans, just like divs, kind of contains something. For let's example say here we have a piece of text. If we have it here and we have a lorem. So this is our piece of text here, right? Now the problem with this piece of text is, let's say we want to change the color of this right here. How will we go about that? Yes, we can maybe add an I tag here, but that will make it italic. So if we want to change the color, but we use an I tag, so you go like this and say style is equal to color red, just some basic CSS just to change color red. As you can see, it becomes italic. Okay, so let's change it to B to make it bold and change the color. But that will make it bold. So you're still with the same problem. Let's make it U. And you should turn it to U. There, auto renaming. But now it will be underlined. But we just want to change the color. Why is it such a big problem? Well, that's where the span tag comes in. Here we can say span. And this span tag basically means put this little piece of text here in its own little div. So span is like a little version of div, where span gets used with pieces of text, like small pieces of text, and div gets used with massive blocks of code. Because you won't really want to put a div inside of a p tag. It's kind of weird. So you'd rather use a span. And this can also be very nice when you work with programming like JavaScript and you want to maybe put some text here. For example, I am, and you want to put like a name here. Well, a way to tell JavaScript a name should come here is by saying span, and then just leave the span empty and go ID is equal to name. Now we still have to talk about a lot of this, like ID, we still have to talk about it, you don't have to worry about it. But what we can now do is we can use JavaScript to target this ID with name and then put some text inside of here. That is where span can be really useful. It's kind of out of the scope of this video, so I'm not going to cover that, like using JavaScript, because JavaScript is something else entirely. But you kind of get the point. So div and span is kind of like containers for things. So where div contains massive blocks of code, and this can even include span, and where span includes like pieces of text or very small blocks of code. So yeah. So basically we have the basic code tag. So we just do that. We have a code tag. And this will allow us to insert some code that the user can later see. And this code can be like actual programming code or something in that sense. For example, let's say let x equals 10, and this is valid JavaScript code. As you can see, it's let x equals 10. We can even maybe put a p tag here and say, look at this cool JS code. You see there, and it looks a little bit different. And let's go here and say let y equals 5. And as you can see there, it says let y equals 5. Take note, it does put it all on the same line. This is a feature that actually comes with code. If you want to break it up, you'll have to use either the pre tag or the br tag. And you can see right there, that will also break it up. Now you'll notice that I said you can either use the br tag or the pre tag. Now, the pre tag is a little bit different than the br tag. It basically covers the entire block of code you want to pre. For example, if we do this, then that will do. Basically what it does, it pre-formats the code for us. So how the code is formatted within this pre-tag is kind of how it's going to be the whole time. Meaning this code is going to actually look exactly like this on the page. So if I save this, it's going to be tabbed in and everything. The change here is we don't have to use the BR tag to split these two up. But what we do have to do now is this. And that will keep it like that. If you don't like this massive space here at the top, then you need to do this. And here at the bottom as well, you might want to do it too. And you also have to do this, just like that. It looks pretty ugly, but that will also remove any extra spaces. And of course, you want to add another thing here, for example, console.log x plus y. Still 100% valid JavaScript code. As you can see here, it works. If you want to add an extra space there, it works. This is a great way to showcase code on your website because now you can just do the code normally without having to worry. If you actually have to indent something, for example, let's say you do this, which usually means you'd have to indent, and you can say, so you can see 100% it keeps the formatting, which is great. So that's the nice thing about using pre with code. So you can either use this or you can use the BR tag and some very nasty workarounds in order to get spaces and tabs. So yeah, that's how to show basic code on the website. Of course, we're not finished yet. There's a lot of other things we can do. Sometimes you don't just necessarily want to show code. You might want to show a keyboard code. For example, a keyboard like input the user can do. For example, let's go here and say to save this file, press Ctrl plus S. And just to make it look a bit easier to read, we can split it up like that. And we can start this with a capital C. Okay, there we go. To save this file, press Ctrl plus S. The thing is, the user can't really recognize that this is a number. Neither can, or that this is a keyboard input. Neither can the computer. Or while just looking at it, you know, a normal person can read and they can figure it out. But a computer, they're going to read and they're not going to know anything. And a person as well, if they're just going to scroll quickly through your page, they're not going to know either. What you can do then is you can use the KBD, basically the keyboard tag. And you just wrap it inside the keyboard tag, and now it will change looks as well. So that will indicate to the user, hey, this is probably some sort of key press you have to do. So if they're just going to scroll quickly through your web page, they can notice this. And then for a computer, since it's using the KBD tag, it will be like, oh, so there's a keyboard command or keyboard shortcut or whatnot you have to use here. So if someone uses a computer to read for them, they can be like, keyboard shortcut, Ctrl S. Instead of just saying press Ctrl S, they can use press keyboard shortcut, Ctrl S, or something like that. So we have this, right? So it just gives us basically this. Now, what if we wanted to show the user the output they'll be getting as well? Well, that would be fairly simple. What we can do is we can just go here and say P, the program output, right? And of course you can do something like that to represent the terminal. You can do that, and here we can say 15 because, you know, 10 plus 5, that's 15. And now you'll see this. But to the user and yet again the computer, this will just be like, what's that supposed to mean? So what we can do is we can say samp for sample, for kind of like sample code in a sense. And then of course we can do that, or it would be actually better to go and I believe this would be GT instead of that. Anyhow, we can do that, and now we'll see this. It's a little bit different formatting, but it also kind of shows that this is an output or something of that sense. Or you can also maybe go here and say, and here we can say sum, and that will be the actual output. So yeah, that's how to kind of show a sample of the output they'll be getting. Now, in programming, you have a thing called variables. This right here, that is a variable. A variable just basically contains something. I'm not going to explain too much about what a variable does, because if you don't really know what it does yet, you don't have to worry too much about it. Because, you're probably not going to use this feature a lot if you don't know what a variable is yet. But basically, this is a variable. That X, that's a variable. Now, you can also reference a variable or talk about a variable in code. For example, the variable. And here we can specify a variable. For example, X is 10. If you do this and save, you'll notice it says the variable X is 10. Yet again, same thing as before. The computer won't know a difference. We won't know a difference. But what we can do is we can say var. And the var one allows us to specify that this is a variable. Do that, and as you can see, there's X. This variable is also great for if you want to do something like mathish, because as you can see, it does make it look a little bit mathish there as well. So this could be like a variable in math. So we did basically showing how to do keyboard things, how to do code, pre, samples, and var. And that's the basic of working with code in a website. Usually if you work with code, this is the most you'll use. There's probably more things you can use, but this is probably the most common of them all. You won't really see other ones floating around very often. Because sometimes you just need to have a symbol in your code, but it's a little bit difficult getting it in there. For example, let's say we want to have the greater than sign symbol in our code to maybe tell someone how to code in HTML. For example, we say code, the body tag looks like this. And now here we can say body, and there we go. Now you'll notice we can't see anything, and that's a problem. So that is where special characters comes in, or HTML symbols. By using an ampersand, this means escape. We can then use, for example, GT to say greater than, or LT to say less than. So now, if we were to save, you'll see we have a less than symbol here. Same here, if we were to say and LT, semicolon, let's take note, it's and, then it's the text, and then it's a semicolon. That's a code. Then you'll notice we finally have two tags without a problem. So that is where symbols comes in very useful. So I'm going to teach you some of the more basic symbols and common symbols you might use. Okay, so we can start by just declaring a p tag, and we can do a few here. Now there's three types of symbols. First is the easy one I love using, where you just say and, a word, so euro for example, euro is spelled like that, and then semicolon. This one is pretty simple, it gives you an euro and you can see it's an euro. The next one is one that's a bit more common than the last one, but also a bit more difficult to read, so coworkers might be like, what the heck is that? By saying and hashtag 8364 semicolon, this will also give you an error symbol, but it uses, I believe, ASCII values to get that. So yeah, you can use this. It would be the ASCII value, if I'm not mistaken, it would be. And then the last one is probably the most uncommon one you'll see, and it is an and symbol, hashtag x20ac. This would be hexadecimal. I can't read hexadecimal. I can barely read ASCII, so to me it always makes sense to rather use the text, and that's why I always encourage other people to use text instead of ASCII or hexadecimal, because these two are just confusing and you have to go search up what it is if you can't go and see what it is. So yeah, those are the three methods to get it, and I'm going to show you a bunch of ways how you can get these in your code, a bunch of symbols that you might want to use. However, I'm only going to show you the text versions because I want to encourage you to only use the text version if possible. So if you want to use the other, you'll have to search up what you have to use those others. But I'm going to use the text. So there's a bunch of characters you might be interested in. For example, the for all. That's like this upside down A. Another one you might be interested in is exist. You see right there. It's like a backwards E. I have no idea what that means. Then you have the NABLA, which is like an upside down delta. I have no idea what that means, but it looks very interesting. There's a bunch of these. I'm not going to cover all of them because there's a full box of them, but this is all math things, and I don't know a lot of math, so to me it's a little bit confusing. If you know things like alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, and zeta, or if I'm pronouncing that last one right, then these will be kind of useful. For example, gamma. That will give you gamma. Delta. That will give you delta. Now here is some of the more interesting ones. For example, copy. If you want to copyright something, then there's like a copy. For example, 2002, for example, copy at 2002. That's pretty interesting, right? What about if something is registered? That can be reg. And as you can see, it's like a little R in a circle. And what if you want to trademark something? For example, Steve's teacher, and we can just say TM. Is it TM? No, it's trade. There we go. Steve's teacher trademarked. And in some of the things I like to use most on my websites is like little arrows showing up, down, left, right. I love using that in tutorials, in websites. I love it. So what we can do is we can use LR and let's just remove these, and we can throw all of them in here at once. So I'm just going to copy this 4 times, and I'm just going to space them out via spaces so you can notice the difference. Next one would be, instead of LR, it would be UR. So it would be left, up, so left arrow, up arrow, down arrow, and right arrow. As you can see there, left, up, down, right. And then let's say you want to add like a little heart. You want to make a website for your loved one, and you want to like put a little heart on the website. You can just do hearts. And there you go, little heart. And yeah, that's the basics of some of the most commonly used characters you'll see or use on your website. So this tutorial will be talking about lists, although I did want to show you something cool. You can create your own progress bar in HTML by just saying progress, give it a minimum value, a maximum value, and then where the progress bar should be. You can almost think of this as a percentage, because 0 or 35 of 100 is 35%. This is a percentage, just take note, but in a sense you can think of it like that. So if I were to make this 50, then as you can see now it's 50. And we can also increase this to, let's say, be 1,000, and it starts at 90. Now, let's say we make this 190. Then as you see, it will be there because it starts at 90. We made it 190. So yeah, that's something interesting you might want to take note of. Not really very big topics, so I'm not going to cover it too much. So, in this video, we're going to be talking about lists. There are 3 types of lists I'm going to be talking about: the ordered list, the unordered list, and the details list. Let's start with unordered lists. They are the most simple of the bunch. UL, meaning unordered list. Now this basically contains a list. So if we were to say LI, inside of this, which means unordered list, and then list item, that's what that means. L for list and then I for items. Then here we can say, for example, what's my favorite candy? And we could say lollipop. And if we save, we get one list item with a little dot there. Then here we could do something, and let's say add another candy, I don't really eat sweets, so this is difficult. Cookies. And you see there, I do love my cookies, so let's move them up just because. Anyhow, so yeah, this is just a basic list. You can have as many of them as you want, and as you can see, they'll add the lists underneath each other with these little there. Now, a nice thing about unordered lists are that you can kind of style them. For example, this is more something you'll notice in CSS, but you can do this if you wanted to. By going style is equal to, and here we can say list style type. And then let's say we say disk. Disk is of course what we see here. That's a little circle. That's a disk. Then we can say circle, which is basically the same, but it's not filled. So it's a circle, but it's an empty circle. So it's white on the inside and with a black stroke here around it. We also have square, and this will just make it a square. So it's up to you what you think looks the best and feels the best. But take note, you can also have lists within lists. Before I forget to mention that. Let's say we have a list here. Now inside of this list we'll have a UL, and inside of this list we have another list item. And here we can maybe specify our favorite foods. Pizza. And bread, I guess. As you can see, we have a list inside of a list. Let's just remove this, so there. As you can see, now it's this list, and then it starts with something extra. You can also specify something. For example, here you can say foods, and now it looks like that, which I think is pretty neat. Okay, now that's pretty cool. Now let's talk about ordered lists. Now they're very similar to unordered lists, with the only difference really being that they have been numbered. So ordered list, OL for ordered list, and then the same with a normal list, we have an LI tag. And here we can say steps you should do when installing Linux. So we start out by Googling the distro. So Google distro. Okay, then we download the OS, and then after we download the OS, we install it. So install, boom. So first Google the distro, second download the operating system, and in free install the operating system. Simple as that. Now with this you can also have like lists within lists. For example, here we can say more steps, and in whoa, and in here we can just create an ordered list, and here we can specify whatever, and you see now there's more steps. You can also make this an unordered list, so you can specify unordered lists and ordered lists within unordered and ordered lists. So if this was unordered, you could make this an ordered list. So it's up to you what you do. But yeah. So you can have an unordered list inside of an ordered list, and you can have an ordered list inside of an unordered list. We can also specify the types here. So instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, we can do something such as type. So here if we say 1, which is the default, it basically just counts. I want a reword to make this 2. Will it start from 2? Nope. A number basically just means it will use a number here. Then we also have something like A for uppercase letters. So A, B, C. So this has to be an uppercase A, because a lowercase a will specify lowercase letters. We also have L. We also have capital I mean, for Roman numerals. So of course, the more you add here, the more this will go Roman, you know. And then of course we have a lowercase I, which will just specify lowercase Roman numerals. If you were to specify the number, so let's say if we were to remove this type here, then we get that, you might want to start from a specific number. So then we can say start, and we can make that, let's say 60. That starts at 60. So that's ordered lists. This is basically used kind of to describe something. So DL for description list. And we can say DT, this could be like the name we want to specify here. So JavaScript. And then let's say DD. DD will basically describe it. So DT is, so the description term, that's what the T is for, term. DD is the description. So in case, a description list, description term, and then description. And in here we can specify a cool programming language. And now we have this, JavaScript, a cool programming language. And of course we can have more here. So let's just go like this. And see, we can have more. Then here we can maybe say something like HTML. Create web page. There you go. As simple as that. Now there is an alternative to this. So let's say you might be giving yourself some flashcards. So instead of having this right here, you might want to hide this description here. Well, to do that, you have something called a details tag. Then here we can have a summary, which is basically the same as this DT here. So let's say JavaScript. And then you have a P tag, which will basically be the same as this DD tag here. So I'm going to copy that, paste that there. Now this isn't necessarily a list, so you'll have to, if you want more, you'll have to copy and paste this details. And in here you could specify, let's say HTML, and then yet again, design web page. Boom. Now we have this. If we click on that little play button, we can see a cool programming language. Click it again and it will be hidden. Same with HTML. So it's very similar to the description list. Difference is this isn't a list, but it was so similar to the description list, I decided, what the heck, why not explain it as well. Now tables is basically a very easy way to get things into rows and columns. So it starts by creating a table tag, and then you have a TR, which means table row. So for every row, you will use a TR tag. And then inside of this, you can have multiple TD tags for table data. For example, let's say Monday. And then we go underneath it and say, so that day you made $44, right? And then in the next row, we can do this. And we're going to do every day of the week because it's just a very tedious process. And in here, we can say Wednesday. And we can just make that minus one, otherwise it's just going to be a very long typing. And in here, we can say you make $10. Now, if you save it, you'll notice we have rows and columns where these, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, is all underneath each other. And then here we have values. So basically, this is a row. So every TR, that's a row. So that's this right here. Then this is what comes first, and this is what comes second. And of course, the more you add, the more there will be. So in this case, everyone that's first will be underneath each other, and everyone that's last will be underneath each other. They do kind of go underneath each other like that. So if one is longer than the rest, then the entire table will become longer, or that entire column will become longer to be able to support all of these being in a nice column right here. So it's not like this is here and then the $100 is here and then the $10 is also here. No, they will all be like this, neatly in columns. And of course you can add more. So if we add another one there, you'll see we get another $44. So yeah, and they don't have to be equal, you know, one can have more than the other, but usually it's recommended to keep them equal as much as possible. But, you know, if your program or your website doesn't require it, then there's no reason to have them equal then. So yeah, that's the most basic version of a table you can get. You can, however, also get, and let's create another table row here, a TH tag for table header. Now this is kind of like a title for a column in a table. So here we can say day of week. And we can create another one. money made. Money. As you can see, we have day of week, which is right here, and then money made, which is here. And these here, they don't have any title, so they don't have anything here. They're just kind of like there, unless we add something there. So let's actually just make this like that, just so it looks a bit better. So day, money, and then here we can maybe say tax, because tax is very high. Now you'll see something like this. So it's just a kind of a nice way to create tables and rows, or rows and columns. We also have a caption option, so if you want to give your table a caption, it is possible. So caption, and here we can say money made weekly. Now you have a caption here that says money made weekly, and then here you have all your table data. And we can even add a few more extra here, so you can see it does stay kind of nicely in line as it should. Like as you see, it always kind of stays in the center. And that's what the caption does, it stays in the center for the table. Okay, so I'm going to delete a few of these tags because it's very long. And then you have 3 more tags I want to talk about. The table head tag, the table body tag, and the table foot tag. These are to allow you to kind of be able to differentiate between the different parts of your table. For example, T head would be the table head tag. That means we will want to move that TR into it, because this is the header. If we save this, nothing's going to change. But you will know everything inside of here is part of the header, this right here. You'll know that. You also have a T body tag, and you'll know everything inside of here is part of the body. So let's move that there. As you can see, nothing changed, but you know this is the entire body. And if you want to hide the entire body, you can just do that if your IDE supports that. You can fold that entire block there, which doesn't change the code, it just hides whatever inside here. And then you have your T footer, or just foot. And this means it's the end of the table. So here it can be like, we can be like TR, and then TD, and then we can say weekly payout or something. And in here we can say how much we made. So in this case, we made about 44,110. I'm not going to declare the tax. So that's 154. But as you can see, it doesn't change anything on the table. However, it is there to make it easier for you, and probably screen readers as well, to kind of differentiate between parts of a table. So you know this is going to be the head of the table. It's this part right here. This is going to be the body. So it's this part right here. This is going to be the footer. So it's going to be this part right here. You can of course use a little bit of CSS to make it look better. For example, let's say style and then width 100%, which just means stretch the amount of width possible, you know. So as you can see, it stretches 100% now. And then of course, if you were to make it 50%, now it will only stretch 50% of the website with the web page. So you can use styling to make it better. And then for example, border 1px solid black. And this will give you a nice border that's 1 pixel solid and black, as you can see there. Of course, we're not going to jump too deep into this because this is an HTML course, not a CSS course. So I'm not going to continue too deeply inside of this. So next up we can look at col, span, and a few others. So let's remove the styling here, because why do we need it right now? As you can see there, styling is gone. Now let's say we wanted this weekly payout to be 2 columns in width instead of 1, because currently it just looks kind of weird if it's like this. So let's actually make it that long. So here we can say col span, and this means column span. And here we can say, let's say 2. As you can see, now it spans 2 columns. But as you can see, there's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. So let's make it span 4 columns and let this be at the 5th column. Now you can see there's a total. So we could even, if we wanted to, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and if we had a 5th one here, we can even say something like total. As you can see, now the totals will be displayed here. And that's another way you can just make the entire table look 10 times better. You can also do the same with a row. For example, let's say we wanted to make go here, and we wanted to make Wednesday span 2 rows. So we can say row span 2. And I believe that should not have an R in front of it. And that's my bad. That should not be on the row there. It should actually be on the data point here. And you go like that. Now, once you have this, you can of course go like this and add another TR. And now that TR is there, you'll see something like this, where there are 2 columns with 1 here. Of course, I don't think this has to be on a TH. And you see it does work on a TD, but it also makes sense to put it on a TH. But you can put it on a TD as well, and it will still span 2 rows, as you can see here. So both of these are actually part of this row right here. So this is 1 row. And we can see that by going here and saying style is equal to border 1px solid black. And that, as you can see, it spans 2 whole rows. So yeah, that is the absolute basics on tables. We have covered a lot here. For example, the T head, which is optional, you don't have to do it. The caption, yet again, optional, you don't have to use it. The table headers, optional, don't have to use it, but is recommended to use it. Table rows, which just allows you to create rows that goes from left to right. And then table data, which allows you to create columns that allows you to fill those rows. So first we have the header. Not to be confused with the head. The head and the header are 2 completely different things. The header tag means it's basically the top of the web page. It's the title. It's the website. Basically the H1 of the website will go in here and be like so this is a topic about fishing in the north. I don't know how to spell hemisphere, so I'm just going to say north. So basically it's the page title, and maybe let's say a P tag underneath it saying some extra info about the title. There we go. It doesn't do anything special. This is more for machines. We as humans don't really care too much about this, but it's great for machines because now if you get like a reader or something to read this, they will know, okay, so this right here, that is the header. That's the head section of the website. It will contain the main title, and it will contain the branding maybe, and the logo, and things like that. Then, usually, underneath it, you will have a nav. The nav is used as a navigation bar. So, here we can do something such as an unordered list and say home, and maybe, I don't know, store. And let's see, one more could be a good idea. Share and donate. Like this could be the navigation to the rest of your website. Now this can usually be multiple ways of implementing navigation. For in this scenario, it's more about the navigation tag itself. When you go to a website, you'll notice they have a navigation. For example, if I go to Odysee, then here, if we were to just full screen this, here is their nav. It's their navigation. Here is their header. It contains their logo. And in this case, their search bar, notifications, your coins, everything. That's what's happening here. Same with if you maybe search up something such as Afrikaans rugby players. Here we go. Wikipedia. This is actually just where I wanted to go. I didn't know what to Google. And in here, you'll notice here is kind of like their navigation. You have your main page, your content. This would be their nav. This right here. As for their header, that could possibly be this part right here. I feel when I start teaching you PHP or some sort of language that allows you to create dynamic websites, you'll understand this more. But just for now, just note that basically this would be the header, This would be the nav because this is the navigation. Same here, this would be the header because it's on the top of the website, and this would be the navigation because it allows you to go places. And that's what's going on here. Okay, next up we have the article section. Now this would be like the main page section. It will contain all of the things in the article and whatnot. And then that's it, this is the main part. Then inside of it, you'll have a bunch of sections. This is to split all of the sections of the article apart from each other. Because here we can say, some time ago, but nobody really cares, right? And then on the next part, this would be like the next paragraph almost, or more like the next section. It's a bit more than just a paragraph. So yeah, let's go like that. And here we can go create another p tag, because they can have multiple p tags. It isn't really limited to one or something like that. You can have a bunch of them. So it's just basically an article tag, but it contains a section inside of it. And every section contains all of the content relevant to that section of the website. For example, let's say the first section explains what is phishing in 5 paragraphs. Then those 5 paragraphs will be about what is phishing. Then the next section will contain 2 paragraphs about what feeders to use to catch the fish. That's this. You can think of a section almost as a div. It doesn't serve the entirely same purpose as a div, because a div is more wide. It has a bigger range of things you can do, while a section is more for just text. It's just basically for text. Now this article right here, it can also be replaced with main, because it's the main content of the website. So it can either be article or main. It doesn't really matter. It's just kind of that you use this to show someone, or to show the robot reading this, that this is the main section of your website. The main content will go inside of here. And then here you could just replace that with maybe a div instead of a section, or you can keep it a section. It doesn't matter, as long as the main content goes in main or article. And yet again, I'm just going to repeat myself here, because you don't have to have a header. You don't have to have a nav. You don't have to have an article or a main tag in your website. You don't need these, although it is good practice to have them, because once a robot wants to read your website, they can easily see this is the main section, this is the main article, this is the ads, this is the navigation, this is the header, this is the footer. So these are optional. You don't need them, but it's good practice to include them. And then yet again, if we were to go to Odysee to show you an example of where it gets used, this would be the main tag right here, because it contains the main content of the website. Future Steve here. So I just want to also tell you something, because I forgot to mention this. But if this is the main tag, right, this whole page is basically the main tag, then this part right here, before this view more and below this we have big plans for 2022, these right here, that would be a section. Then this pop culture would be its own section until view more, so this would be its section. Education would be a section. So it's a way to split up your web page. That's just something you want to take note of. Now back to the video. And in here, this would be the article or the main tag, because it contains the main stuff of the website. And this would also be a nav tag. This might even be an aside tag, which we'll get to in a second. And then yet again here would be main, and in fact, I think this could even be considered part of the header, because it's not part of the main content. Or if you use an article, this could just be part of a section. Anyhow, you didn't have to worry too much about structuring this out or whatnot. Just know that you can use these tags to basically make your website more beautiful for robots. Then you have an aside tag. Now, the aside tag is basically for extra information, like related links, or for example, this right here. this can be the aside tag because it has related links. It's not navigation to the rest of the website. Like this would take you to another place in the website. So there you see we are now at the same web page, but just at a different location. This right here will take you off of the web page to something else. So this would be the aside. Here, I don't know, do we have an aside? We might have an aside, but I have no idea. Most of this just seems to me, yeah, I don't know if we have an aside here. But yeah, so, whoa, my bad. So yeah, the aside is just for extra links. It's basically like a second nav. This can also contain like extra content that is related or extra information. You know, you could also maybe put like an ad in there or something whatnot. This is just a side. It's like something extra on the page. People usually don't need to see it. It's optional for them to see it, but it is on the page if they want to see it. So here you can maybe put something like best fish to try and catch is the ball python. There we go. So there we go. As you can see, it doesn't really change anything in terms of styling or whatnot, but it's just on the side. And then last but not least, we have the footer, and arguably the most important part of the web page, the one you'll probably be using the most. This is for information like copyright, privacy policies, terms of use, maybe like related links to this article as well. Anything that you might want to put at the end of your web page can go here. So we could maybe say create an unordered list with links inside of them. So here we go, and then we can say home and I don't know, share. So almost the same as that. And then here we can go more about us. There we go, more about us. And then afterwards we can go and create a p tag. We can say and copy, and here we can say 2022. And there you go. Now we have a footer. It's for the end of the web page. It is to share more things. It is kind of to close off. You'll notice this the most when you go to a website is the footer. And here, for example, I believe if we were to go to the whole end of the website, there we go. This is considered the footer of the web page. Privacy policy, about Wikipedia, disclaimers. Here is the copyright things that you might want to know about, the cookies, the developers, whatnot. And I don't know, Odysee may have, but I can't confirm it. Let's go look here. And yes, they do. Here is their footer. Community guidelines for you can ask questions, support, terms, privacy policy. It's at the whole end of the website. Usually it's at the bottom. Not always, because some websites has an infinite scrolling feature where basically you can scroll and scroll and scroll forever and they'll just provide you with more content. Websites such as YouTube or Kitsu has this. Like if you go to the YouTube homepage, you can basically scroll down forever. You won't just find the end. So they don't have a footer at the bottom of their webpage. Same with Kitsu. They basically have an infinite scroll. So it's very difficult to actually get to the end. So yeah, that is the footer. And these are just the ones I wanted to talk about today because it contains some useful things you might want to know more about. So the header, basically anything that's on the top of the web page. The nav for the navigation on the web page. The main or article. This is for the main content of the web page. Div or section is to split your content into multiple items, multiple parts. Aside, things that can go on the side of the web page. It's not required to be on the web page, but it is on the side if you want to read that extra information. The footer, what's on the bottom of the web page, including like copyright stuff mostly and links for the developers and whatnot. Not all web pages need this structure though. You should just take that as note. Some websites just don't need it. It depends on what your website is and what your website's needs are. If you're on a website, you literally need a header and then directly underneath it a navigation, and then on the side an article, and on this side and a side, you then do it. But if your website doesn't need it, most thing you need to know is just that these tags exist. If you can use them, then do. Instead of just making this a div at the end of your website, make it a footer. Because then a screen reader will know, okay, I don't have to read this last part because it's the footer. It's just a bunch of links and unnecessary information. Same with a side. A side might be an optional to read. Main is what we're mostly interested in, so let's read that. That is the basics. So this tutorial will be a little bit difficult to make because usually when we talk about classes and IDs, we usually talk about them inside of CSS. But we don't really know CSS. We know some basics like changing the font color, but that's about it. We don't really know a lot about it because this is an HTML course. So I'm going to leave a lot of this to be covered inside of the CSS and inside of the Bootstrap course. So for right now, I'm just going to cover the basics of when you should use them, and I'll also give a little bit of a CSS example here as well. So first, what is a class? Let's create maybe a paragraph tag here and just give it some lorem. Now here I'm going to say class is equal to important text. Now, it doesn't do anything to your code or to what the user sees. Although if you were to right click and just say inspect, you will see it has a class of important text. So it does something in the code, but it doesn't do anything for the user. The user can't see it, it doesn't do anything. And multiple p tags can have the same class. That is completely possible, even if the p tags contain different content. So why would we want to use a class? Well, sometimes you want to apply styling to a specific element, and this styling might be used on another element as well. That's why I say this is a lot to do with CSS. So let me actually create a p tag here and a p tag here, and these two p tags will not contain any classes. Like that. So we have 5 p tags. 2 or 3 with classes and then 2 without classes. Now I'm going to quickly add some styling here by saying style. And I'm going to use the basics that we already know. So if I were to say p, and in brackets I would just say color, and I'll say red. And this will make all of the p tags red. Because we're saying take the p tag, so here the p tag, and make the color of it red. And this will change the text color. We save it, and then the text color is red. But sometimes you don't want this to happen on every single p tag. And take note, you can use classes on more than just p tags. I'm just kind of giving an example with it. But let's say you only want this to happen whenever it has this important text class. Well then, instead of saying p, you can say dot important text. When you say save, then as you can see, only the p tags with important text as a class has red text. So that is why we use classes. It's for if you want to apply styling to more than one item. So this is a very big thing in the CSS, so we won't go too deep in it, but just know you can use classes on any element and it will apply styling that has been applied with CSS to whichever element that is. So I could even put this important text class, I could put it on this h1 even though it's not a p tag. Save it, and now the h1 is also red. You can also add multiple classes by adding a space and then, for example, big let me just make that a B. And then if you go here and say dot big, then here you can say font size, which will change the font size. And let's say 99 px for pixels. Now you'll have a big text wherever it has this big. If I were to remove that big and put it here, then now this will be big. So that's classes. We're not going to dive any deeper because this isn't the CSS course. Cool. Now let me remove all of these p tags. Now next up we have the ID attribute. Now the ID attribute is very, very similar to the class attribute. They are basically the same. However, the difference is there can only be one ID that's being used. For example, if I were to say on this H1, my ID, and then I were to have another H1, I am not allowed to use that same ID. I will have to say my ID1 or my ID2. Same for if I had a P tag and not an H1 tag, so P. Then I'll have to say ID3 or change this to something else, like para for paragraph. So that's the main difference. They do the same thing. However, with an ID, you can only assign that ID to one thing. And once it has been assigned, you're not allowed to assign it to something else. If you want to do styling with an ID, you can use an hashtag instead of a dot. And you can say my ID. And in here you can say color. And let's make it purple. Now, as you can see, the color is purple. If we were to remove this too from that my ID, you'll notice it still works on both the tags. However, you should not do this. An ID is specifically created to only work with one item, and that item alone. You do not want to have multiple tags with the same ID. So always try and keep your IDs different. And that's the basics. That is what an ID is, that's what a class is, and that's what you use them for. And yeah, that's it. So in this tutorial, we'll be covering SVGs, or in other words, Scalable Vector Graphics. I'm not going to cover everything, and I'm not going to cover it in depth. Mainly because I feel SVGs is a topic entirely on its own. So I'm only going to cover the basics, such as drawing a circle and drawing a rectangle, and then I think that's where I'm going to leave it. But if you want to learn more, you can either go to WeSchools or you can Google it and you can find for yourself what else you can do. What is an SVG? A scalable vector graphic. So you have normal things like an image. I can actually see if I can open up some sort of image for you. Lucky for you, I always keep an image on hand. If I were to go here and zoom in to this, let's say this 13 right here, you'll notice the more I zoom in, the uglier it gets. And that is because with PNGs, JPEGs, all of these image formats, it uses pixels. And pixels, whilst they are pretty nice, they're not very accurate on the end of the day. Or they can't be very high quality, because the higher quality it is, the higher quality or the higher the image size should be. So for example, instead of being 1 megabyte, if you want to be able to zoom in a lot, then it's going to have to be 13 megabytes as an example. But with an SVG, you can use math to draw things for you. So you can zoom in as much as you want without ever losing quality. An example I want to show you before I get started with it is here. This is code by Deny from SoloLearn. He actually gave me permission to use this in a different video, but now you can't search up people's usernames anymore, so I didn't know how to find it. But this is Deny on SoloLearn's code. And let's just add some styling, and you didn't have to code along here, it's just to show you an example. Now, I know a lot of my viewers likes anime. So one cool thing here is we can have an SVG anime eye. This is entirely done with CSS and SVG. If we zoom in, we can zoom in as much as we want, but we'll never actually get to the point where it can be considered low quality. So as you can see, the more I zoom in, the more it's fine. I can't actually zoom in any more than this, but as you can see, you don't really lose any quality, and that's because it uses math. It uses math to figure out what all of these are. So yeah. Now that's just an example. We're not going to code something that complex because it will take a while, but if you want to code along, I do have a video where I do code this out by hand. So yeah, if you want to follow along, then you can go watch that video. Anyhow, so that's just an example. Now let's do some basics of it. Now you can do that easily by saying SVG, and this should be in its own little thing. And inside of this SVG, you can specify what type of item you want, what type of shape. For example, a circle. And I actually have to... There we go. Now they're actually self-closing, so we can do that. Now this will allow you to draw a circle. Now you can set the radius, and let's make the radius something like 40. As you can see, we get a weird-ish circle there, but we can move that because there is a real circle there. It's just that the center of the circle is at the top of our web page. So we can move it by saying CX, so the circle X or the center X, whichever you prefer. And let's go 100. As you can see, now it has been moved here. Because remember, this is X and this is Y. Now we can also go CY for circle Y. And we can change that to 100, and that will move it up and down, as you can see here. So X moves it from left to right, Y moves it from up to down. And there's our circle. We can change things such as the circle color by saying fill, and let's make it green. Now we have a green circle. We can give it a little bit of a stroke, so stroke, and let's make the stroke color equal to, I don't know, pink. That sounds cool. Now you can't really see it, but if you were to say stroke width and make that equal to, let's say 4, then you'll see a little pink outline. That's a bit difficult to see, so let's go red. There we go. So now it has a red outline. And you can change it to fit your preference. So yeah, that's the basics of drawing a circle with SVG. So as you can see, it's not that difficult. If you are willing to spend enough time in something like this, you could code some really cool SVGs. The same with a rectangle. We can code a rect. So let's go here and say, instead of circle, we can go rect. And in here, we can of course also say the width and the height. Because remember, unlike with a circle where the radius determines everything, with a rectangle, the width and the height determines it. So width 400, height 200, and you'll get a black square. You can of course change the color by going fill, and let's go blue. And there you go, it's blue. And you can do the stroking again if you want and whatnot. You can also limit the SVG sizes. So let's say you want to limit yourself to a specific size on the page. You can do something like width is equal to, and I think these are also pixels. Don't know what the measurements are, but I believe these are also pixels. So this should be about 200 pixels or something. So let's say we make it the width 200 and we make the height equal to 400. That's perfectly fine. As you can see, this can only go up until 200 and width before it gets cut off. But the height can go up until 400. So let's make that 300 and let's make this 150 like that. As you can see, now it works nicely. However, if we were to change this to 200 instead of 400, as you can see, it will get cut off again. So you can use this to also set a specific size for your SVG. Cool. So what is a form? A form is basically what you use to send data somewhere. So let's say I have an whole application, like a whole YouTube website. Now, let's say I upload my video. Now, I need to upload my video into a form. Or let's actually make it even easier. Let's go here and search twitter.com. So when I see this right here, that's a form that takes a text input. If I go here and say hello world, then this will actually be able to be confirmed as a form. I can add an image to the form, I can add a GIF, a smiley, basically anything. This is a very customized form, as you'll see as we go on. It's very customized. But when I say tweet, it sends this data to somewhere where we don't have to worry about now. It's called the backend. But we don't have to worry about the backend just yet. We'll get to that later. So it sends this to the backend. The backend stores it inside of the database. The database then later sends this data back to us. So if I say tweet, this was sent and to the database. And now it's being displayed to me from the database. And that's the form. Once we say tweet, it sends it to the backend. That is basically what a form does. It's very basic. And we're not going to do anything with databases or the backend in this tutorial. So don't worry about it. Those things are a bit complex for our current skill level. So first we have a form. Now we're not going to talk about the action just yet. But this is a form. Once we have this and we save, we're not going to see anything. But we can put things inside of it. For example, a select. So here we have two things that are given to us. We have a name and we have an ID. We can actually say friends and friends in both of them. It doesn't matter that they're the same. Now this names right here is something you're mostly going to be working with once you get to the backend. This name allows you to kind of link the data with each other. So when you say I want the data of friends, this name right here, not the ID but the name, then it will send all of the data inside of the select to you. So you don't really have to worry about this right now. So for right now, I'm going to actually just delete that because we didn't need it. We'll be needing that once we get to the backend. But you can still add it to your forms and stuff. It works perfectly fine. Now this ID we'll be using a bit later. If you haven't seen my video on IDs, I highly recommend you do. So yeah. Then in here, this select statement takes something that's called an option. Now this option contains a bunch of values for us. So here I can say Jack, and then what the user sees, we can say is Jack, my friend. So when we send the data to the backend, this is the data that's going to be sent back, this value. This here is what the user will see. So we won't receive this in the backend. We will receive this value here. So it's very important to take note what the value is, because the value is what we'll see once we want to work with this data in the backend. However, this is what the user will see. They won't see this. Now we can do this. If we save this, we'll see a little thing like this. Jack, my friend. If we click on it, we have options to choose from. Let's actually zoom in a bit here. There we go. We have options to choose from. So we have Jack, my friend, Nick, my friend, or Sally, my friend. And then we can select which one we want. So this is what the select does. It allows us to create a form thing like this, where you can select from a drop-down item. Now, let's say you want to make Nick the default one by default. So the selected one by default. You can then just say selected. If you do that and save it, you'll see Nick is now by default selected. If I refresh, it's going to be Nick. If I were to remove this, it will just take the first one in the list, and that's Jack. So you can use selected to say which one should be selected by default. You can also do something such as here with select. You can say size is equal to, and let's say 2. Now if we do this, you can actually see there's a little scrolling now. So it's no longer a drop down, but a scroll down. And then the size you set here is how many values it will show at once. In this case, if we say 3, it will show 3 at once. If we say 1, it's going to be a drop down. If we say 2, it's going to show 2. The more values we add here, of course, if we go like this, and we make this 4, then now, as you can see, it does show everything, but only 4 at a time. So you can use the size to say how much a specific person can see. Now, let's say you want the person to be able to select multiple at a time. So let's actually bring size back here. We make it 2. And we say multiple, just like that. Now, when you say this, the user is allowed to select more than one. So we go here and there. But if you say control, so if you hold control and you click somewhere, it allows you to select more. Let's actually change the size back because I think it will be easier to see it like this. Yes. So now you can select multiple. If you hold control, so take note, you do have to hold control, otherwise you can't select multiples. So just take note, some users might not know that you have to hold control or shift to select more than one. So you might have to make a little note there for the user themselves, or you have to use something else. Now let's actually go here and let's create a text area. We don't need a name for now, we can just remove that. The ID we can say is description. The column, that can be 30, the row can be 10, no problem. And in here is what the default text will be. So let's leave that empty for now. Now like this, it's just a basic text box. And the reason why it's so weird is because we actually had a space here and it's going to take that space literally. Now it's going to be normal. So now if we start here, it's going to take it in. So it's just a piece of text. This here, that's considered a text box. So like that, this would be a text box. So just take note. Now this right here, this can be used for something like a big chunk of text. So let's say you have a description, or you have something that's going to take more than one line of text to do. Then this will be the way to go. So not if you want to use not if you want to get like the user's name, or the user's age, or the user's password. This is not what it's for. It is mostly for descriptive stuff. So when someone maybe wants to post a post, unless that post is 1 sentence long, this would be the best way to go. And of course here we can say default disk, and then that will be all our default text, which we can also change. This rows and columns here just basically say how long it should be and how wide it should be. So we make columns 10, it's going to be 10 columns long. And we have rows, that is how long it would be. So here we can say 9 for example, or let's make it 1. Now as you can see, it's basically very small and you can't really see much. But you can also transform it with this little box thing here. So if we go like that, you can do it manually as well. That right there is very small, but you can use that to also resize it. So the user also has the option to resize it if it's too small for them. Next up, or actually there's one thing I want to show you before we continue to the next one. I want to show you a label. Now label is very nice because here we can basically say what something is, and when they click on the label, it will actually select that thing. For example, let's go here and say description. And in here we can say enter disk. Now here it is, and let's just actually make this look a bit better again by going like this maybe. There we go. So enter description. Once you click on it, it will automatically focus on this. So currently, if we type, we're not going to get anything. But if we click on this, we can start typing. So that's the nice thing about a label. Now this 4 right here, that's linked to the ID. That's why I didn't want to remove the ID earlier, because if we want to use label, then we'll need an ID to put its 4 to. So this is going to be linked to the ID. If the ID changes, then this will no longer work. Cool. Now we also have a button. So button. And here it can be like click me. Now take note, in a form, there are 2 types of buttons you can get. You can get the submit button, and you can get the button. Both of those two do two entirely different things. The button allows you to click it and it will not submit the form, but the submit button will submit the form. This right here, this is by default a submit button. So let's go here and we will make this one the submit and this one the button. So we can just say type is equal to button. So this button can be clicked without actually submitting the form. This button, if it's clicked, is going to submit the form. So let's go here and say submit. And what I mean by submit is it will send the data to the backend. I'll actually give you all a little bit of a real life example of where this submit button would actually be useful. But right now, let's focus on this. Now, currently if we click the buttons, only the submit button will do something and we'll just refresh the page. And in here with the click me, this is a normal button. You can actually make the button do things. Now, usually I don't really cover things outside of the topic that we're doing. But because I think this isn't a bad idea, I'm going to show you all what this button can do. So we can say on click. So when someone clicks the button, so it's on the user click event. So if we click it, it's going to do an on click because we're clicking it. So when it gets clicked. And in here we can say alert and in quotes. Now, if you used double quotes here, then you'll have to use single quotes here. If you used single quotes here, then you'll have to use double quotes here. Because if you use double quotes here, it's going to break out of the quoting system we have. Or if you just want to be safe, just use these quotes right here. They're right next to the one on a normal UA2T keyboard. Now I'm going to use single quotes. And here you can say clicked. Now this right here is JavaScript. We're not going to go too deep in it because it's JavaScript. We're doing HTML. But basically we're saying once we click the button, alert the user that was clicked. Now if we click it, it's going to throw an alert that says clicked. And right now you have written your very first JavaScript as well. Now something that can also be pretty cool is the field set. So field set, and take note, you don't have to remember everything I'm teaching in this tutorial because I'm going to teach you a lot of things in this tutorial. So here we can then add a legend, and this legend can be something like tell us about yourself. And then we can have if you want, you can have a label, and here we can say name, and then maybe another label that says age, and then age. Cool. Now currently this is how it will look. Tell us about yourself, then with a little square around it. That's the field set. So this square, that's the field set, and the text here, that's the legend. Now we can of course put things here such as an input, which we will be getting into a bit more later. But yeah, so there's an input, and we can also put a BR tag here to break the line like that. And now we already have a kind of cool form. Now what I want to do is I want to talk about the input. So there's a lot of things you can do with input. So let's get through them. So we have an input, and by default it's of type text. Now this right here is like a minified version of a text area. This is what you use if you want to get passwords, emails, names, and maybe like a search query. This is what you'd use. For a text area, you'd use descriptions and anything that will need more than one line, basically. So here we can say Steve to say my name. Now you can have different types of input. In this case, it's a type of text. But let's actually create a few. So the type password. So let's actually keep one for text and then one for password. I would like that. Then the password. Now the difference between these two are, and I should just probably put a BR here, is that this top one, the text, will display the text. The bottom one will not. It will just be a bunch of dots. You can actually customize what type of dots these are. So that's pretty interesting if you might want to. But you'll, I think, need a bit of CSS for that. Anyhow, then we also have another type of input, which is of type submit. So you have the choice between a button, which can have two parts, either a button or a submit button. The input type submit only has one thing it can do. It can submit. It's a button with the purpose of submitting data. And let's say we have a few inputs here. Let's say text and also text. And then we're going to give them both values. And the value is basically just what's going to be inside of the input. It's almost like a default value. You can change this. And here we can say 24, and here we can say Nick. So now we have two inputs, one that says Nick and one that says 24. You can change them, no problem. This is just the default value, so if we refresh, it's going to give us those as default. Now we can have an input of type reset, and this will basically reset our things to default. So if we go here, we say reset, it's going to reset everything to default. I feel a lot of people don't know about this, but it's a really useful button to have because it resets all of our input back to its default. Next up, I want to talk about the radio input type. So here we can have a type of radio, and we can give it an ID, and let's say Jack, and we do need to give it anything else. Here we can just say Jack as well. So if we say this, we get 3 little dots. Now currently, you can't really understand what those dots mean. So here we can add a label for, and here we can say Jack, and here you can say Jack. So let's add a bunch of labels. Boom, like that. Now this one will contain Nick, and this one will contain Maggie. Now Nick here will be for Nick. So let's go here, ID, Nick, and this right here, Maggie. And we also want to split them up, so they're not all on the one line. So we can say BR. Now you'll notice we have a radio button group. So what's a radio button group, you may ask? Well, you basically have a few things you can choose from, almost like a drop down, but you can only select one of them. So if I select Maggie, I can't select, oh wait, problem here is you can't actually select all 3 of them. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to give them all the same name. So here you can say name is equal to best friend, because only one of them will be submitted to the backend. So they can all have the same name since only one will be submitted to the backend. Now, if you select one, you can only select one of them. So, but yeah, so that's a radio button group. You can only select one of them. You can't select more than one. On the contrary, you can have something that's even cooler. You can have a checkbox, and actually say best friend and not best friend, but that's fine. We can now change the name to be something different, because currently with a checkbox you can submit more than one thing. Now if we save it, we'll have squares. Now basically a checkbox is like a radio button. However, you can send more than one. So you can select more than one thing that you want to send in. So that's the difference. A radio button, you can only select one of them. A checkbox, you can select as many as you want. And you can also unselect them. Something you can't do with a radio button. So if you have selected a radio button, you have to select a different radio button in order to unselect the previous. So if I were to just change this back to radio button, once I've selected that, I can't unselect it. So if I select this one, this will be unselected, but now this one will be selected. You can also make like this one is selected by default by saying checked, and I will make sure one of them is selected by default, so they have to select one anyways then. So by saying checked, you can say which one is selected by default. Now you can do the same with checkboxes. So if we go here to checkbox again, and we just make this 1, or yeah, I guess 2 will work, 1 and then 3. Then now we have our checkboxes, and there we go. Now we have our checkboxes. And as you can see, this one is checked by default because we have the checked right here. So in the middle, the checked is right there. We can add the check on more things. So now 2 will be checked by default, and then the user will have to uncheck them if they don't want them. So yeah, that's the difference between a checkbox and a radio button. Now, inputs can be a little less boring as well. For example, let's just keep one input here. We can remove checked, as well as the name, as well as the value, as well as the ID. Okay, now here we can do something like color. Now it's a color input. Currently it's just the black box, but if we click on it, we are able to select colors and get an RGB value back. I think, yes, we can even change it to something else. For example, hexadecimal, RGB, and HSL. So this is pretty neat if you want to use something like this. You can also get a date with an input. So here it just says day, day, month, month, year. If we click on it, we can select a date. So that's pretty cool. So now it will fill that date for us, and it will be able to be sent to the backend. You also have an input type of email. For example, if we say here type and we make it email, If we save it, we can enter our email in here. Now, currently you won't really see anything happen, but if we were to add an input here of type submit, and we were to save this and then enter some random thing in here, say submit, it will tell us to please include an @ symbol inside of our email address. So this also does some extra things for us. Now, what if you want them to actually enter their email? They have to be forced to enter their email. You can say required. You can do this with any input type, not just email. You can do it with name, with password, with basically anything, file, anything. And this means if they try to submit without filling in this field, it will tell them it's required. If they try and fake it, then it will also say, hey, this needs an @ symbol. And then if you do that, and now we'll actually submit it. So take note, you can use this required basically anywhere. I can change this to, let's say, text, and now this text will be required. If I submit, then it says I should fill it in. This can be password, this can be anything. So this required just basically means the user has to fill it in, otherwise they're not allowed to go. And you can have it on as many things as you want, and some might even not need it. So if you go like this, you'll see this one needs it, this one needs it, this one needs it, but this one does not need it. So if I say submit, it's going to submit it. Next up is the file type. Now the file type is a little bit tricky because oftentimes if you really want to send the file to the backend, you have to actually do a little bit of a workaround, which we're not going to do right now because I'd rather not. Now here you can just say file. Now if you say that, someone can choose a file, and let's say choose file, and here we go, there's my file I want to choose. And why is everything so big? Open it, and as you can see now, it will also be there with a little text saying which one we selected, and we can also submit that file. You can also get an input type of number. So if we go here, then this can be a number, and we can actually increment it here. You can't put text in here, but you can put numbers in here. You can also give it a minimum and a maximum. For example, here we can say 10. So if we try and enter anything below 10, like 2, it's not going to be able to take it because 10 is the minimum. If we were to give it a maximum, then we can't enter anything, let's say above 100. So here, and it actually resized to what we might want. So now we can't put anything underneath 10 because that will be too low. And we can't put anything above 100 because that will be too high. These little buttons can also not go higher than what they are set, and they can't go lower than what they are set. So we give it up until 10. It can't go lower. But if it's in between the max and minimum, it can go. You can do a similar thing with text type of input. So here you can say a min length, and let's make it 10. I never really needs quotation marks. And you can also do a max length, and let's make it 20. Now, if we try and enter something here and we submit, it cannot because we need at least 10 characters. That's the minimum we gave it. Now, if we enter too much in here, actually that should be max length and not min. That's why it did that. So max, there we go. Now, if we enter too much in here, it won't even accept more than what we enter. So 20 is literally the max. We can't go more than that. So yeah, as long as it's a bit more than 10 characters and less than 20 characters, you can submit the data. You also have an input type of type range, which has a minimum and a maximum value. So let's make minimum equal to 0 and max equal to 100. And now, there we go. So this is basically the minimum and the maximum. You can also give it a default value to start at. So value can be like 75. And now it will by default be here. So that is 75th value. This would be 0. This would be 100. This would be about 50. So let's put a value attribute here. And let's say I am cool, right? So that will just put some text in here. And let's say we don't want the user to be able to edit the text in here. So currently I can edit it without a problem. Now I can just say read only. This will make sure that the user cannot actually edit anything in here. So I can try and edit as much as I want, but this is read only, so I'm not allowed to. We can also disable an input, so we can say disable. It's similar to read only, but it's more intense with the fact that it's literally disabled. You cannot do anything with this. It's completely turned off, you could say. You basically turned off the component. You can also change the size and make it something like, let's say 4, and that will make it shorter. And let's make it 10, and we'll make it nice and long. Let's make it 100, make it very nice and long. You can see here. So you can use the size to also set how long an input should be. And we've already covered things such as max length and max and min length. So if you haven't heard of those or you don't know what they are, I do recommend you go watch the previous tutorial, even though it's a pretty long one. You also have a pattern attribute. And this pattern attribute will just basically tell the user how they are allowed to insert their stuff here. So if I do this, and let's actually remove this value because that might cause problems. So if I do this, this pattern is called regex. You don't need to know regex, you don't need to care about the pattern attribute. This is for future reference. But anyway, so I can put anything in here. If I try and say submit, it says the format is incorrect. That is because this is only allowed to be 3 characters long, and it is not allowed to have numbers. So if I say DSDWD, that's allowed. If I say SDSD, that's not allowed because it's more than 3 characters. If I say 123, it's not allowed. So yeah, that's about what regex does. It allows you to set a pattern, and if that pattern is matched, then it's allowed to be input. If it's not matched, then it's not allowed to be input. Some pattern you might find useful is something like a phone number pattern, and this is copied directly from WeSchools because I can't do regex to save my life. Now, you might not understand this, I don't understand this, but basically, if you're just going to do that, it's not going to allow it. You need to put in some sort of a valid phone number. For example, 123-999 dash, or that should just be 2 dash, like that. So that would be considered a valid phone number in some locations. Not in South Africa, but it would be considered a valid phone number in some places. Next up, we also have the step attribute. Now, the step attribute says with how much something should step. So here I can just go say number. And now if we go like this, it will step by 3 every time. So if I go here and make that 11, now it will step by 3 yet again. So the step just basically says how much it should step by. So should it go by 3, should it go by 1? By default, it's usually 1. But you can change it to anything from -100 to +40. Now, when we refresh the page, you'll notice if we start typing, it doesn't do anything. Now, we can make it so when we start typing, it automatically starts typing in here on page refresh or page load. I'm going to change this back to text. And that is by doing the autofocus attribute. Now, the autofocus attribute basically means once I refresh, I can start typing, and this will be what's autofocused. You can only have one autofocus attribute in your form, because if you're going to have multiple autofocus attributes on your inputs, so let's say like this, it won't know which one to autofocus on, so it will take the first one it sees. So if we go like this, it's not going to autofocus on this one because you can't focus on 2 at the same time. And I think that's good enough for the input. Next up, we can go to the form. So, first one I want to talk about is the action attribute. Now, this is something we didn't really cover in previous video, we just removed it. Now, basically, this action attribute says where the form is going to go to. So, to which page. So, I can say /index. So, let's say this is the login page. So, this is /index, and I will go to the index page, and we can just select .php or something. Now, if we were to just submit this, it's going to say it cannot get index.php because index.php doesn't exist. Currently, I don't really know how to show this to you without actually showing you some real backend. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to show you some real backend, but don't worry, I will make sure it's not too complicated. Now here I have another VS Code open. Now this is Python and it's using Flask, so you don't have to worry too much about everything you're seeing here. So let's just go to login. Now this is the login page. Now as you can see, here we have a form. And the form's action is going to go to /login. And we can actually see this. So if we go here, just move this to the side. We go here. We can actually go to this location. So let me just open link. So if I were to now go to sign in, we have a login option here. I can try and log in user with my password if that's a valid password. No, it's not. Okay. Here we can then do Jack and a valid password, and there we go. Now what's happened here? Basically, this form sent us to the /login page. Or no, this is the, if we want to sign up. This is if we want to log in. It's ginger, it's a little confusing. But basically, if it's the sign up page, then take us to the login form. If it's not the sign up page, take us to the home page. Now, if you're using PHP, you won't just have it as simple as that, unless you customize your system to be like that. But anyhow, so this will take us to index. Now, index is just a normal page. But in the back end, something that you might find interesting, you don't have to understand any of this. Just take note. This is just for fun sake. Now, in the back end, we have a page for, so here's the login page. And then here, let's see here. Here is the index page. Now, basically, if we receive a request from the front end, then we check the username and we check the password. We get that from the front end, from the form. So if I were to go here, and I were to just open up my templates again, and I were to go down here, then we have our login, and then here we take in a username of type uname. So here ID is uname and name is uname, but name is what we use here. So if we go here, you'll see we need uname, and it's using that name, not the ID, but the name, and then pwd for password. So it sent a post request, which is just a secure way of sending data to the home page, and the home page basically logged the user in. I'm not going to cover too much of this because it is backend, and we don't know anything about backend yet. It's just something so that we know about it. Cool. So that is what this action does. It sends you to a specific page. Currently, we won't use it too much, but it's good to know about this for future reference. Now you can also specify a target. For example, you can say target, and if you say _blank, this is by default, and it will take us to a new page. So we say submit. As you can see, it's asking a pop-up, which will take us to a new page. Actually, this isn't default. I think by default it's self. It just uses this page. Yes. So by default it's probably self. And yeah, so you can mostly use those two to either open up a new tab when you want to log them in, or just to open up this tab, or use this tab to log them in. It's optional, it's up to you. You also have your method, and with this you can specify the method this form is going to use. By default, I believe it's get, so get. And with get, basically all of the data you're sending will be done here. So in the URL, after this question mark, all of the data will be stored there. So get is if you want to do something that is not secure, but you just want to send data and you want to make sure that if someone else wants to use that URL, they can. Post, on the other hand, is more secure, and it doesn't use this URL up here to send the data. It sends it via a secure networking method. However, that means if someone wants to go to the exact same page as your user, they can't have all of the same data because it's not a get method. So post is if you want to do things with passwords in it or secure details of users in it. Get is if you want to send just general data that if it gets leaked, it's not going to really cause harm to anyone. You don't have to worry about this until you get to backend, so just ignore it if you want to. Well, there are a lot of types of video formats such as MPEG, also known as MP4, I think, or I think that would be MPEG-4. Anyhow, so MPEG, AVI, WMV, MOV, Flash, OGG, all of these. So whilst there are like a ton of these video format types, officially supported types are only MP4, WebM, and OGG. So you want to try and keep all of your video content in those three formats. So either MP4 or WebM or OGG. Same with music. There's a lot of types of audio formats you can get, like WMA and AAC, WAV, OGG, MP3. But HTML only has official support for MP3, WAV or WAV, and OGG audio files. Now, if you want to follow along, I'm not really going to post my videos and music and stuff I have online. Not really necessary. But I can recommend you to go to Pixabay if you want to get some free music and free videos. So here you can search for music. I'm using this Everything Feels New song. And then you can also go to videos if you want, and you can find yourself a video. I think I am using this one, the Sand and Beach one. Now let's first start with displaying a video. So we have a video tag because it's already supported. You can put your source in here directly, but usually it's not recommended to do that anymore because you can make it so much more powerful if you don't do that. Now the reason why you don't want to put the source inside of the video tag is because you have a dedicated source tag. Now I'm not going to go too deep into this, but basically you have a source tag and you can link the source to your video. So here you can say src is equal to, and then we can say vid.mp4, and you can also specify the type because this can also be used inside of the music tag or the audio tag, which we'll get to. And you can say video, and then what type of video, in this case mp4. If it was an OGG video, it would be OGG. If it was WebM, it would be WebM. But in this case it's mp4. Now you might also have a backup video. So let's say their browser is old and doesn't support mp4. Then you can have your OGG, but you actually need an OGG file. I only have mp4, so this won't work that great. But then you can say OGG. And let's say their browser also doesn't support OGG, but you do not have a WebM version of your video. So then you can say your browser does not support the video tag or something in this sense. As you can see, there's the video. It's pretty big, so you might want to resize it. So let's go here and say the width, and we can make that equal to, let's say 400, and I believe those will be pixels. As you can see right there, there's the width. You can also set a height, but since I'm already setting the width, it will just keep it at the same aspect ratio, so I'm happy with that. Now currently you can't do anything with this video. It's just like an image. So to give controls to this video, you can say controls, and this will give the video playable controls. So now if I play it, you'll see the video plays. This video doesn't have any sound, so it doesn't matter if we can hear the sound or not. And there's also a download, playback speed, and picture-in-picture mode. Now let's say we remove this mp4 one. What will happen? There is the OGG one, so it's just going to give us an empty thing. What if we remove that source tag? Also, nothing will happen. And yeah, that's what will happen if there's no sources to play from. It will just throw an empty video. But because my browser still supports showing videos, it doesn't show this because I'm using Vivaldi, and Vivaldi supports showing videos. So this works perfectly fine, and it will never show this. You can also give other things. For example, so let's say when the page loads, you want this to autoplay, so it plays automatically. You can say autoplay, and this will automatically play it once the page reloads. You can also give it things like muted, and this will mute it by default. So as you can see, muted by default now. And there's a lot of these cool attributes you can give it. However, I think I'm just going to keep it to this for now. Next up is the music. And right off the bat, we can remove the source and give it a controls tag. Then here, just like with the video tag, you say source. And here you can say src and music.mp3 type, and you can say audio/mp3. And of course you can add more sources here depending if the browser supports each source or whatnot. And here, if you play it, it will start playing the music. And just like with the video tag, it also has the muted and autoplay, so you can both mute it and autoplay at the same time. Don't really know why you want to do that, because if you say autoplay and you say muted, then it's going to play, but you won't be able to hear anything because it's muted by default. So don't really know why you'd want to do that, but you can if you want to. Now, of course, some of you might be wondering, okay, but what if this is in a different folder? So let's create a new folder and say music. So what if this music here was inside the music folder? What will we do then? How will we use it? Because if we're going to refresh, it's not going to know what to do. Or actually, it seems like it does. Interesting. But anyhow, if your audio is inside of like a source folder like that, then you can just say music slash, and then as you can see, there's MP3. Now if you do that, then you can access the audio file if it's inside of a different folder. So you can just use this slashing. So just like if you were to use an image, it would be the same method of getting to that file. Now sometimes you don't want to store the videos on your website because storing videos is kind of expensive because they take a lot of storage. So you want to rather store a video from YouTube on there. You want to display that video. So what you can do is you can go to YouTube, choose your video, and let me just make the screen a little bit bigger. Then if you scroll down, you'll see a share button. Now this share button has the option to embed. If you click on the embed, it actually gives you an entire piece of code snippet which you can use and just directly paste into your code. That's the very nice thing about YouTube. They do all of this for you. They set the width, they set the height. You can of course change this if you want to. They set the source to the YouTube video. They set the title. They set the frame border. And this is in an iFrame, but you don't have to worry too much about what that is right now. We'll get to that in a future video probably. And it says what is allowed. So it allows autoplay, it routes clipboard write, encrypted media, gyroscope, picture-in-picture. If you save this, then it will load in a YouTube video, which I think is pretty neat. And if you play it, then you can play the YouTube video from the website. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, that's basically media files, including media files from outside sources on your website. You can use iFrame with more than just YouTube though, but I'm not going to jump too deep into iFrames just yet. iFrames is basically just how you display or show a website within your website. And I'll show you much different examples of this. For example, if you want to get a very quick one, you just search up my YouTube channel, pick any video you like, give it a thumbs up, and then say share. Now you will see an option saying embed. It will give you an iframe that you can copy and paste within your website. So let's go here and just paste. Now I'll cover most of this in a second, but now if we were to run our HTML page, then here we go. We now have a video from YouTube on our page. So that is pretty cool. And we can actually play it and it will work and whatnot. So yeah, that's the basics of an iframe. I'm going to show you how to work with them mostly locally, but you can use outside sources like YouTube if you wanted to. Cool. First, I would like us to create a new web page. So let's go here, create a new website or a new HTML page. We can call it posts.html. Now posts.html is a very basic HTML page. So let's just remove everything we don't need, like the bootstrap. We don't need that. That's a tutorial for another day. Font awesome, we don't need that. Yeah, we can just remove everything here. We don't need any of this, except for maybe the meta. But we can delete that if we don't want it. Anyhow, now I can just open this with Live Server. And I can give it a title, posts, and I can give it a div. And this div will contain a h2 that says I am cool as the title, and have a p tag with lorem inside of it. We can copy this, and this time it will be I am very cool, and in here we can add some more lorem. Okay, so this is what we see on this page. Nice. Now here with index.html, we can put that inside of an iframe, so all of this, and then view it inside of this page. So an iframe syntax is pretty simple. It's just iframe, and you close it like that. It has a source, and this source is what you want to display. So if we want to display this posts.html, which is in the same folder as this index.html, we can say posts.html. And now here we have a little web page inside of our already existing web page. So you can see we have a web page, but now we can view the other web page inside of it. You can add things such as a description. This description will help screen readers describe what is going on, or just in general describe what it is. For example, this is the posts page. Won't change anything here, but now it has a description. We can also add a title. It's always recommended to give a title because screen readers may use that title to basically say what the content in iFrame is. Very much like the description, but more important. So, posts page. Yet again, we won't see a difference, but screen readers will. We can also give it a specific width and height. For example, a width of, let's say, 400. Now the width is more. And in a height of, let's say, 700. And now the height is more. Let me make it a bit smaller so we can still see that scroll bar. There we go. And you can, of course, also style it. For example, style border 1px solid red. This will make the border red. This isn't the CSS course voice, so we can remove this style attribute. But you can use that same method to also remove the border. So if you wanted to, you could go here and say none. And that will also remove the border. And that is that. An iFrame is really that simple. It's just there to display a web page inside of your web page. It's a very basic concept, and a lot of people actually seem to struggle figuring out what it means, but it's just a web page. You have this website and it's inside of your website. Now, the head tag is an element for metadata. So data about data, or more data about the website. The metadata itself is not displayed on the website. So we won't be really able to see what happens inside of head. We can put something in head and then use that something later on, but it won't just be displayed for us. Whilst you could do something like P and then put some text here, and if you save it, you'll see the text. This is not recommended because the head basically loads everything up before the rest of the website. So it will load scripts and styles and data and titles and whatnot about the website before the website starts loading the body. So if you're going to start putting body stuff in here, then you can just as well remove this head tag because it will not make a difference on the end of the day. Now I feel the best way to show an example of this would be to use my HTML template. So let's start from the top. First, we have some extra metadata data. First, we say what character set is being used. In this case, UTF-8. UTF-8 is usually what you'd want to say here because that's kind of the default, unless you have some special characters that you want to use on your website. Then this right here is the viewport. The viewport is the user's visible area on the web page. So this can change depending on the device. On a smaller device like a phone, it will be less than on a massive screen like a computer screen. For example, this viewport would be less than this viewport because this one has a lot of data it can contain, while this does not. By setting this, we give the browser instructions on how to deal with this, how to scale depending on the window size. So first we set width is equal to device width, and this will basically set the page width equal to the screen width of the device. And in this initial scale 1.0 sets the default zoom of the web page. So yeah, I just recommend adding this to your website. These three mainly always. If you can, then do, because they will just add some extra benefits to the website that could be very useful. Then this right here gives a description of the website. If we go to Google and we search how to cook, now here You see this right here? That's what's in the description. So whatever you put inside of here will display here. Then we'll get to these in a second. Then we have, of course, our title. And then here we have an icon. So if we have an icon we want to put on the website, like this Google logo here, we can use this. So let's say I have an icon. So here we go. There's the image. Now if I were to rename this just to icon or something simple. Now usually this would be a PNG, but for this scenario, saying JPEG will be fine. Then here we can just change this from PNG to JPEG. And now, as you can see right there, there's a little moon face. Now if you said PNG and you removed this white background, then here would be a clear background. You'll see this in the project we're going to do in the next video. Cool. Now here, this is how we'd import CSS, but we don't have to care about that right now. So this right here is where we import data from a CDN. A CDN, in a sense, is just a website that contains code. For example, if I were to go to this website right here, so to this link, we'll just get a bunch of JavaScript. Now we just link this script tag to this page right here, and it will load this JavaScript for us. Now why would you do this, you may ask? Well, if we go here and we create a button, and we say click me, you'll see a normal click me button. However, if you were to go here and say class btn primary, and there we have a nice button. And now we can even go outline, and then we gotta move that inwards. And there we go. I love how this button looks. And this is provided to us by Bootstrap. So by importing all of this for our Bootstrap, we can do this. So without doing any extra work, we get a good looking button. Everything basically looks good if you use some Bootstrap. And in here with Font Awesome, this is the same as with Bootstrap, but in this scenario, Font Awesome gives us icons instead of styling. So here I can go H1, and then let's add an I tag. We can just say class pencil. There we go. Now we have a little pencil drawing here. And that is because we imported Font Awesome here. And that is the power that head gives you. It gives you the ability to bring in other data, other metadata that you can put inside of your website to use. You could put all of this inside of your body. That is 100% possible. But it is not recommended because you want these to load before your website starts up, before the rest of your website loads. Some people, however, would take this script tags and they will put it here at the bottom of the HTML. The reason for this is because JavaScript can take up a lot of time to load. So some people like to put the script tags at the bottom to make sure that JavaScript loads after the website has loaded. So they at least see the website before the JavaScript comes in. This is usually only a problem with bigger websites and with larger JavaScript files. But yeah, that's it. That's it for head. In the next tutorial, we'll be focusing on building a little blog website. And then after that, we'll take a look at this Bootstrap right here that gives us these nice looking buttons out of the box. We are going to create a blogging website. Currently, it will look trash and it won't really work a lot. But as we build up skill, so as we learn Bootstrap, as we learn CSS, as we learn JavaScript, we're going to take the project we have now and we're going to add to it. We're going to add what we've learned to it to improve the project. Then at some point, this will be a completely working project. with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and at some point React, TypeScript, Vue, all of these different cool things. This might even get some PHP thrown in there and whatnot. So let's get started. Let's start trying to build our website. Now I'm going to say HTML, and I'll keep most of this, like the description, and we can delete font awesome for right now. So I'll keep all of this right here for now. Next, we can go, instead of my site, we can say Bloggers Paradise. And right here, we now have our first website. Now this shortcut icon, I do have this shortcut icon somewhere. Now if we go to github.com, then you will see, if you go to Weebnetsu and then YouTube projects, this link will also be in the description, of course. Then you can go here to HTML blogging website. And here is the whole project source code. I don't want you to just copy and paste this. I want you to go here if you need some extra code or something like the icon we're going to use right now. Or if you want to fix a piece of code because your code isn't looking the same. If we go to source, then you'll see font awesome and images. We want to go to images. And here we have two images. I want you to download both of them. So you just click on them, and yeah, there's a download button right there. You can just download both of them and add them to your project. And once you've downloaded that, you can go here, create a new folder, call it SRC for source. Then you can create a new folder inside of that and call it images. Now inside of images, you want to paste those images you have. So I've already downloaded them, so you can just paste them in there. So paste, and you should see this image right here and this image right here. Cool. Now once you have that, you are all set. Now here where this icon is, you can just change that to src, images, and then logo.png. You could also rename that to say icon instead. And now you'll have a little logo here at the top. Cool. Now let's start from the top. First, I would like the website to have a navigation to at least 3 pages. The home page, the user's profile page, and to create a blog page. So I'm going to create a nav, and then inside of that nav, I'm going to create an unordered list. And inside of that unordered list, I'm going to create 3 li tags like this. Then inside of each li tag, I'm going to create an a tag. This a tag will contain links to the different pages. So in this case, index.html, the current page we're on. And here we can just specify home because this will be the home page. We can copy this and we can paste it in these two. This one will link to profile.html and to post.html. Here we can say your profile and then post blog. Then you'll see these right here. Cool. Now let's create the header. So the header, we can just say header, not to be confused with the head. The head and the header are 2 different tags. That's very important to take note of. We can give it an h1 and then Bloggers Paradise because this is the name of the website and I would like it to be clear to everyone. Then we can give it like a little slogan that says home for all bloggers. There we go, home for all bloggers. And then we can also link our top post of the day. So top post today, and that can be a link to somewhere in the website and then the title of the post. In this case, I'm just going to say ... because we do not have a title yet. Next, let's do the footer before we get to the main content of the page. So we do the bottom part of the page. So I'm going to create a footer and then use the center tag to center the content in the footer. Take note, it's red here because the center tag is not well known. In fact, I believe in probably some websites it doesn't really get used. But because I'm using only HTML in this tutorial, I will be using this to center my text. But in a future tutorial, I'll use something else. Here we can create maybe an H4 tag and say subscribe to our, and we can maybe give our YouTube channel here. You could put like your copyrighted things in there for like, this is copyrighted, and the developers can go look here for API code and whatnot and whatnot. But here I'm just going to give a shout out to my YouTube channel. And that will just go to https://www.youtube.com/Steve's and here we can say YouTube channel. Cool, so now you'll see this. Now if I click on this YouTube channel, you'll notice that it will immediately redirect me to this page right here. But we don't want that. We want the user to stay on our page. So when we link out to a different website, we should then use target_blank to tell it to open up a new blank tab. If we click on it, you won't get this, but I have an extension installed to stop that from happening. But then it will open up on a new tab instead of on the same tab. So rather do that, because if we open it up on a new tab, that's better. Because then they can still stay on our website. Because the longer they stay on the website, the better. Cool. Now for the main content of the website. So we can go here and say main. And here you can either choose between a div or a section. I prefer to go div here just because that's what I prefer, but you can choose whatever you want. Mainly, I just use the header, the main, the footer, and the nav. I don't care too much about the other special tags. Now here we can create a div with the ID today I had a bad day. Then inside of this div, we can put an H2 with the title today I had a bad day, and then a span to give the user's username that wrote this. So Martin Maguire. If we do that, we'll see this. Now we can add a P tag, and this P tag will contain a bunch of lorem, like that. Just some dummy text, because I'm not going to write an entire blog. I'm too lazy for that. We can then add two buttons, one to like, and then say how many people has liked this, so you can also like it, and then dislike, and here we can say 2. Now we have a like button and a dislike button. If we click them, nothing happens, but in the future, once we know a bit of JavaScript, something will. Now this is cool and all, but wouldn't it be cooler if we had some, well, I don't know, just something to make it look a bit more friendly? Well, we can have something there. So let's go here and search for font awesome. Now if you search for font awesome, then you should see this right here. The first link. Then right here. This is font awesome 6. You can just say start for free. Now font awesome 6 is what we'll be using to do all of this. So if you are using a different font awesome version, you might have some trouble. But once you're here, you can just go to the download page. So if you scroll down, there's the download. And as you can see, font awesome 6, which is latest. And here you can also change the version. And we want to download this right here, free for web. And you'll see this right here, a download. Once we open it, you'll see it right here. We can extract that. If you don't know how to extract a .zip, then I do recommend you get WinRAR and then just install that. That will allow you to extract a zip file. But you can extract it, and let's see here. It extracted to here. You can then copy this, and you can go to your project. So right here, this is where my project is located. Then you can go to your source and just paste it there. Then once you do that, you'll see this right here. Now we can go here, rename it, and just remove any extra text because that's just going to make our lives harder. Now it's Font Awesome. You could specify 6 if you want. But once we have that, we can import it. So here we can say link, and we can just go src font awesome, and then css, and then all.css. So Font Awesome css all.css. You don't have to worry about these CSS files. They're just basically given to us, so we don't have to do all of that CSS. Once we save this, we should have Font Awesome imported to our project. Next, we can add some icons to make everything look a bit more fun. For example, here we can add an icon that has the class .fa and then fa house user. Save that and you'll get a little house right there. So here we have fa and then fa house user. To know what icons Font Awesome has, you can go to their website, to icons, and in here with search, you can do something like house, and here you will find house. I recommend going and clicking on free, so you know what the free items are. And of course, if you wanted, you can search user, and here you go, and there. So this is the one we are using. If you click on it, you can see here they give you how to add it. Now actually I see we should use solid, but I did not do that. Some bad Font Awesome 4 habits. We can then copy this and we can add it to these three or these two here as well. The next one we want is the one that's fa user, and the one after that is feather pointed. I do not know how to spell feather, and then pointed. Then you'll see this. So now we have home, your profile, and then post blog, and it all has like these nice little images next to them. With the rest of the website, we can also add a few things. For example, here with this button, we can add another one right here. So instead of saying like we do here, we can paste this here, which is an I tag with class fa thumbs up. And then we can do the same here with dislike, but this will be thumbs down. Save that, and now we have a thumbs up and a thumbs down. That looks pretty neat. And yeah, that is that for this first part. I would like to add more blog posts, but that's quite a lot of typing. So what I am going to do is I'm going to copy and paste what I already have and put it here. You can do the same from the GitHub link, but then you'll notice we now have more blogs. So here we go, Martin Maguire, and then there, and then Lisa Aka, and then here, and then Megan Colley, and then here. You also notice this one has a continue reading, because that could be a future thing that we could implement for if it's too long, they can just say continue reading and it will take them to a page with all of this. And as you can see, so yeah, it's just basically copy and paste. But take notice of this one. Wow, a car just hit a cloud like a lightning bolt. It has 100 likes and 5 dislikes. Way more than the rest. So I would say that is the top post of today. So let's make that the top post of today. So if we go here, we can actually see that it's right here. A car just hit, and there we can see it. We can take this ID, and here with this A tag, we can just paste it. And then yet again, we can go down and just copy this title and paste that here. Now if we save it, it will link us down here once we click it, because it has a hashtag and then that div's ID. So a car just hit, and here a car just hit, and that will take us down here if we click on it. So as you can see here, cool. So we just built our first page here, the index page, the home page. It doesn't look great, but the idea is that we used some HTML. We used some cool HTML knowledge to our advantage and created a website. In the next tutorials, we'll be making this website look better using Bootstrap and CSS, but that's for a future tutorial. Next up, we can create another page, and it can be called profile.html. Profile.html would be quite similar to this index.html in terms of the head. The rest of the things we don't need as much, so we can just go here and delete all of this like that. Cool. Now we can go to your profile, and as you can see, we just see this. Also, I believe I forgot to give it a description. There we go. Let's blog until we can blog no more. Cool. And if for those of you who forgot, the description is basically the little description people see when they Google your website. And here we can give it another description. There we go. View your profile on Blogger's Paradise. And in here we can maybe say the user's username, and then that is their profile. So Josh Pazinski, and then profile. Now there we go, Josh Pazinski and profile. We keep the navigation bar because we want that on basically every page, so you can go wherever you want, whenever you want. We can then create a form that is of type post. We will not be implementing this form yet because we do not know the right technologies to do that. We can then use a field set to make it look good, and then a legend where we can maybe specify an h1 tag, and then this user's name. Just paste that there. You'll then see something similar to this. Now we can use again our font awesome and add a button inside of this h1 for now, because currently we have no other method of making it look good without putting it in this h1. But later on we will find a good method for it. And then we can use an I tag with the class of fa regular fa pen to square. This right here basically means edit. So if you want to edit this name here, you can just click on that and edit the name. Cool. Just remember to specify type button on this button and not type submit. Otherwise it will submit the form and we don't want that yet. Next, we want maybe a div, and this div will contain an image, and this image will contain source, then images, and then profile photo.jpg. And then we can maybe also give the user's username here, because we're going to expect that that's the user. Now if we were to just go here, you'll notice we have images and then profile photo.jpg, and that's what we're using here. Currently it doesn't quite fit that great, so we should resize it. To do that, we can go here, just format the code and say width, and let's make it about 300. There we go. That looks good. We can then add another edit button here, and that will give us an edit button. We could resize the page a tad so we can see it better. So right there. So this is their profile picture, and if they click on this, this should theoretically allow them to change their profile picture. But currently, we can't do that. But we can at least put in the basics. Cool. So we now have a button for editing, even though we can't edit yet, but we do have the button. We can then add a p tag, and I'm just going to add some lorem here. This will be their description. So I'm just going to say lorem times 4. And there we go. There's their description. And we can take this button again. We can copy it. We can go here inside of this p tag and add it there. So at the end, if I just disable this right here, then you'll notice we have an edit button. Cool. And that's that for the profile page. Doesn't look great, doesn't have a lot of data. But as I said, we will be building up on this later on. Next, we can create the post.html page. This is basically where they'll be posting their blogs. I'll copy this, paste this here, close these two, close this, go to the top, hide the nav, hide the form. Delete the form, even though we will be using it, but not that exact one. Cool. Then here we can just give our new description. And here we can say post blog. If we now go to post blog, we'll see this. Now we can create a form of type post again, because we want to pass in secure information. This could be a get, but there will be a lot of text that's going to be passed into this link right here. So for right now, I don't think get is the way to go. We should be doing a post here. But we will be getting to get and post later on once we have more control over it. We can then create a label, and this one can just be for title and say blog title. We can then get a break line there, Now we can create an input of type text with the name title and the ID title. Remember, this 4 here is linked to the ID, not the name. So if I save this and I click here, it will auto-focus on this. If I remove the name and I click here, it will auto-focus on this. So it's focused on the title, not the name. It's just usually common to find that the name and the ID is the same, but it does focus on the ID. We can then give it a placeholder. So placeholder and say at my job today ... And then after that, we can maybe give it a minimum length. So the title should be a specific amount of characters, so 10, and then the max length should be 30. And then it is required. Now, if they try to submit this, which they can't yet, then it has to have at least 10 characters in the title and a max length of 30. So it can't go over 30 characters. We can then add 2 line breaks here, and then we can create another label. This label will be for content and blog. Content, we can add a break line here, and then add a text area with the name content. Content, the columns and the rows can be the same. We can add a placeholder. This week was really strange. We can add a min length of 50 characters, which isn't that much, and then a max length of 500 characters. You could probably increase this if you want. And then required. Now we will have this. So we can add a blog content and then the blog title as well. And then of course at the end, we can add an input of type submit with the value post. There we go. Now if we click this, it will say this field is required thanks to this required tag here. If I add something, it will tell me I have 2 characters and the minimum required is 10. So if I go here, 10. Okay, now if I were to make this too many characters, which it does not allow. Cool. Then here, it will tell us to fill in this field because it's required. Then it will tell us it needs at least 50 characters, which we can add. Maybe post. It can't do anything yet, but the idea is there. So there we go. We have created a very basic blogging website. We can't blog yet. It looks terrible, but I promise you, follow along with my tutorials that's coming up and we will make this website look great. We're going to use Bootstrap, which we're learning next, to tweak this to look good, because if you saw my previous tutorial, I showed you an example of a Bootstrap button out of the box and it looks great. We'll be doing things like that here. Then we'll be learning CSS to take the Bootstrap we have and even improve it more. So now the website will look even better. After that, we'll learn some JavaScript, add some functionality to this website. And after that, we'll learn some PHP, React, and a bunch of other things, and we'll be rebuilding that website, this website, for every one of those languages. In this case, with PHP, it will be pretty simple. With React, it will be pretty simple, and whatnot. And yeah, that is that. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next tutorial.